The Committee on Appropriations is back in the Committee of the Whole for the discussion on the matter of Bill 257-31 as substituted by the committee and further substituted on the floor. Just quickly, what we want to do, of course, is we have with us this afternoon Ms. Taling Taitano, the Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Administration and Acting Superintendent of the Guam Department of Education at this time. With her this afternoon is also Mr. Barry Mead, a member of the Guam Education Board. So we thank them for their presence this afternoon. We'll now go into the bill and maybe just a short summary of the bill and how it's set up. The bill, of course, in the first part, sets the appropriation levels for the Department of Education for the upcoming FY 2012 school year and budget year. You have just received a chart that gives you the layout of the budget and where the money is being appropriated to, the object categories, and the sources of those funds. And we'll show you then, and this should tie into the sections of the bill that have those totals. The appropriation level for the coming out of the general fund for the Board of Education to then allocate to the different schools is set out in the summary of the base operation appropriation, of which $200,968,906 is the funds that are being available from local sources for the Guam Department of Education. And then the school lunch program is inclusive of $10 million of that $200 million. The other sections of the bill then have the other appropriations to the Guam Department of Education, and they're contained in the various sections following Section 3, which shows the base operation budget. And there are appropriations for increments and promotions and reclassifications of 1094173 and 987,540, respectively. The other miscellaneous appropriations, once again, we are delineating the budget for the Chamorro Studies Division, and that's contained in Section 5. The miscellaneous funding are for programs such as the Interscholastic Sports Fund, which is $612,000. $92,000 of that will be for busing, I believe, for the school program. Health and physical education activities also will receive $279,754. And then Section 7 authorizes the funds collected from the Junior ROTC program to be used to support that program. These amounts are the reimbursements of the instructor salaries that are reimbursed by the federal government. The federal government reimburses a portion of the salary of the JROTC instructors, and those funds are then used by the program to support off-island competition, uniforms, and other support services. We continue to work with the Department of Education to try and rectify the issues that have been raised in the handling of federal program monies. And they are, as you know, under a third-party receivership for the federal funds. And we are once again supporting the efforts of the department to take them off that high-risk status, and we are providing $250,000 to assist them in implementing some of the recommendations to take them off high risk, which would allow us then to do without the third-party receiver or third-party fiduciary agent. The summer school authorization, as in all other budgets, allow for DOE to spend the revenues from the summer school program to support that. This is, in Section 10, we have the textbooks and collateral materials, and this is an advance appropriation as we have in other years, and we provide $2 million, and that this is all consistent with the governor's funding recommendation in these object categories. and so it allows them to order that. And then the other sections are the what we would call the administrative sections for Guam Department of Education, and that is accounting for and reporting their expenditures and the different reports they're required to post on the website. There's the report for electronically be sent to the speaker for their employees and where they hire, so we can monitor that. There's a utilities reduction incentive for the schools, so that if they're able to save money from their allocated budget, that the schools get to use that to support school-based activities. The transfer authority for the Guam Board of Education and the Educational Financial Commission to work together, so that when they see differences between the expending allocation, they're able to, upon presentation and justification, have those adjustments made by a vote of the Financial Commission. And then the other areas are the cost savings initiative, which allows them to use any cost savings they have for prior year obligations and the purchase of supplies and materials. Section 17 then appropriates the money, the $525,000 from the pilot program that was left over from the supplemental appropriation, and this would make this funding source available in this fiscal year for the opening of the new school year requirements and repairs of George Washington High School, Simon Sanchez Southern High, and Agata Johnston Middle School. And then these appropriations are made available to the Guam Department of Education until they are expended for remedying those situations at that school. The other provisions, of course, are the provision for the Guam Board to use shared human resources for school populations below 325 in fiscal year 2011 and 12, and a temporary budget transfer for the Department of Education for 2009. And this will allow them to cover their shortfalls, as we saw in the committee report that shows a lapse in currently in the operation side, and there's a shortfall in the personnel side, and this allows the transfer into that for this fiscal year to resolve that problem. Section 20 is, of course, the provisions for that begin to deal with the opening and allowing FQ Sanchez to remain open, asking the board to, based upon the budget levels given to them this year, that they will look at and determine if there's alternate ways of keeping FQ Sanchez open and allowing them to do that, knowing that the budget they have from now till September allows them to fund operations at Sanchez, and that this budget authorization for FY 2012 will have necessary resources to continue funding operations at Sanchez if they so desire. If the board makes a decision that they're going to that they're not able to do that, and they decide to continue with the decision to close Sanchez, then the governor is vested with the authority to keep Sanchez open by the issuance of an executive order that would allow him to keep the school open for 2011 and 12. That is the bill as you have before you. Before we begin with asking the questions, I'd like to go ahead and give an opportunity to Ms. Tulling Taitano and Mr. Mead to make some comments regarding the budget as proposed.
Mr. Chairman, maybe before you do that as well,
yes.
Do you want to set maybe some of the ground rules so we know exactly whether we're going to go section by section?
Oh, okay.
How many questions, in time?
Sure.
of that
Yeah,
nature?
well, thank you very much, and Sujusmasi, Madam Speaker, for that suggestion. That's the overview of the bill. We'll have comments by Ms. Tulling Titan and Mr. Barry Mead. Then we'll have some general discussion on the bill, general thoughts on the bill, and then we will open up discussion to questions then specifically to Ms. Tulling and Mr. Mead. After everyone gets a chance to just make their general comments on the bill would be the questions. And then we will We'll allow you opportunity for one round for everybody, and then if there's additional questions, we'll come back a second round. But give everybody a chance to go at least one round first. And then after the questions, we will then call for any amendments or additions or deletions to the bill. We'll try to limit discussion, and we'll leave that to your discretion. Generally 5 minutes, and we find that that really is sufficient time to allow individuals, but we're pretty lax on that. We will not prevent anybody from fully allowing them from fully the full opportunity to get their questions answered. So at this time, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'll go ahead then and turn it over to Ms. Taitano.
Thank you, Senator. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to comment on the budget that's being proposed. Certainly, by allowing us to at this point to know what our budget is for the upcoming year, it helps us to plan for the opening of school as we put our resources in place. There were just a couple things I wanted to make clear that's not included in the budget. One of the things that's not included in the budget is the about $7.4 million in prior period expenses, which include the $4 million in teacher furloughs. And so as you know, we continue to get calls to make payments for legal actions or past due amounts. I just, want to continue to work with the legislature to see if we can't find funding to address some of those issues. The other concern that I have, and I talked briefly to Mr. Badassi about it, is that as we increase the amount of, if indeed the food services vendor is successful and they're able to increase the number of school lunches sold, there still is a gap between the federal subsidy we receive and the funds that we receive from the students against what we have to pay to our food vendor. And I just want to make sure that those increases are reflected in the budget. Other than that, I'm happy to address any questions that the senators might have. I don't know if Mr. Mead would like to make
Thank you very much, Senator Pangilinan, for the opportunity. The only thing I would like to bring to light is Section 2 of the bill. In the findings of the legislature, based on what the decision or why the decision of the board was made. The decision of the board was not made exclusively to the 2009 Evergreen Report, nor was that decision made based on a $100,000 shortfall. That decision was made on an over $700,000 budget for the entire school. And one of the things that I pointed out the other day was, if I'm not mistaken, the current report from DOE is that DOE is short 26 teachers. If we put the 7 teachers back at FQ Sanchez, then the department becomes short 33 teachers. We have that expense. We still have that expense of paying whoever is hired to fill those vacancies. So the transfer of the teachers is offset by the expense that would have been incurred. So it was not $100,000. It was an expense of running a school that cost $18,000 per child with a payroll expense of $640,000. That was primarily the impetus behind why the board made its decision. The average across the board is, with the cost of the central office, roughly $9,000 per student. This school is double that number. So it would be very easy for the parents of 30,000 children to come in this door next week and say, why are the 54 children at UMatic worth $18,000 and mine are only worth $6,000? So we put ourselves in that dilemma. So the board's decision was not based on $100,000 savings reported in the Evergreen report, the decision was based on a $700,000+ expense for the department as a whole. Also looking at the idea that the classes are combined. You have kindergarten, first grade students in the same room with one teacher, not getting the individual education of a certain grade that the students in all of our other schools receive. Those children go across the street to a playground, across a highway. There are safety issues. And there are a number of other issues. Someone reported to this legislature yesterday that my motion did not carry a caveat for the superintendent and the principal to look into the budget of that school to bring it in line. Part of the purpose for that caveat was to get the union to agree to allow us to set aside the contract at FQ Sanchez and allow us to transfer out 5 faculty that cost the department over $400,000, replace them with faculty that would cost roughly $200,000, bring the number down to $9,000 a year, and keep the school open. That was fought adamantly, and I think the person that fought the most was here yesterday. So having failed in that, and looking at the total number, the final decision of the board was to close that school. So don't let it be just the Evergreen report is the impetus behind it, but it is the economics, unfortunately, that we have to deal with when we deal with these issues. And that's what this board has been tasked to do. That's what we did. It was based solely on that. It's a heartfelt action. No one likes closing schools. A lot of the people from UMatic that are in the audience were probably my students at Ocean View years ago. But at the same time, we have to look at the entire department and how we operate it. And finally, I have to say that it makes it very difficult for this board in the future to make a decision.
Thank you, Mr. Meade. At this time, I'd go ahead and recognize then the speaker and the chairman of the Committee on Education and give her the courtesy of opening up the comments on Bill 257. And then if you raise your hand, I'll get your name.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I thank you very much as well for
Yes.
being able to put a budget for the Department of Education inclusive of all schools. And I know that we are at a very difficult juncture, and I take to heart, of course, what the board member has said. And I just like everyone to know is that the listening audience, of course, that every member in this legislature is very sensitive, of course, to not just the needs of our school children, only in the South at FQ Sanchez, but to the needs of all of our children. And as I stated yesterday, our primary responsibility is to make sure that because of our compulsory education, that every child will be educated and be given an adequate education, and everyone's definition, of course, is very different. I think that if you look at the bill and taking into consideration as well some of the concerns that you had and the board members are concerned, that you'll find is that the bill actually here addresses everyone's concern. It gives the board even the flexibility to be able to move forward, to even go back to your amendment or your motion in the board, and even to the requests of the community, the families, the children, the members of UMatic, because even in my discussion with them yesterday twice in two separate opportunities to be able to hear them and hear even their requests, to hear their pleas, and to give them an opportunity to be able then to have a say-so as to what should happen to their community, because they only want the best. And I'm sure it's the same as what the board would want and what everyone would want. So the flexibility actually is provided here. I know there's language, and I know what the decision of the board has been, but it gives you again that opportunity to go back, like I said, to even your amendment, where you're able then to have our children then all educated, like you say, close to or even at the average cost. What this would do, yes, is that there is the language, and it's a very strong language, where it actually says that that the board shall have the authority then to explore and implement alternatives of, for the school. And that's a very strong language as well, and it's specific to FQ Sanchez. So then you'll be able to take the concerns of the community and the children and the concerns of the education as well, to be able then is to, yes, open FQ, and also to make sure that they have the education that we all want. And this hasn't really been done for the most part, and I don't know if it's ever been done, aside from what is mandated by law for the charter school. So I think this is an opportunity. I hope that you'll be able to, embrace this and work with the community, because they're ready. They really would like to work with you, Taling, and with the board. So I encourage you then is to take this to heart, to take, of course, the community's wants and their needs and their concerns, you see, for their school and their school children, and at the same time providing an adequate education for all of our children. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Mr. Mead, did you have a...
Yes, I do. Just for clarification, the way I read this and based on our conversation and what you just said, am I to understand that the Department of Education, with the situation at FQ Sanchez, would be allowed to set aside the contract that would require us to send the 5, 6, 7 faculty that were removed from that school back?
I'm not an attorney, of course, and I can't answer that. I know you've closed the school already, and so therefore, and the teachers, or everyone rather, has been transferred out. And depending, the way I'm thinking, of course, depending on how now the superintendent and the board allocates the monies to everyone, that, of course, using your best judgment in terms of the availability of funds and how you're to allocate that would determine exactly just, how creative or other alternatives that you might be able to come up. And, I'm not, of course, in the position to influence you and tell you how to do your master scheduling, and who, and what levels to do all this. But as educators, I'm sure you can be creative enough to be able to work within the limitations of the law, because you are, at least the language, here that's listed, it gives you that flexibility.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much. Senator Blas and then Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, am I made to understand? This is general comment before we
Yes.
add specific questions?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, then this is just a little bit of a prelude when you get into the questions, and I appreciate the work that was being put together by the committee. And I also appreciate the continuous work put together by the Office of Finance and Budget, along with the SES, in being and trying to prepare this. Now, recognizing the process of which we're going to be doing this, although it's not unprecedented. Okay, it's a unique situation, and with regards to we're dealing with one portion of a full set of a budget. I don't want to say piecemeal, but one at a time. And that said, there was I as explained to you earlier, and I'm going to be hope to be able to if. And I think you recognize in SARS what some of my concerns are with regards to the revenue projections and whatnot. And I don't know whether it is going to be fair, for lack of a better term, if it's just going to be Mr. Badassi that will be able to answer these questions, or should there be other individuals brought in to be able to basically try to answer some of the concerns that I have with regards to before we even get into the education budget, is the revenues. You know, and how we're going to be able to, and how this was derived, and how we're taking into consideration what has happened over the last 72 hours nationally, and how that is going to affect. The question that I'll have to the education department with respect to that, and maybe you can start to prepare this, Talling, is what do you anticipate with regards to possible cuts in federal funding as a result of what Congress is contemplating? Of course, you don't need to answer that question now because it's just general comments. So I have those concerns, as well as I have concerns with regards to the recognition that although we've managed to increase the budget for education on one side, what does that do to the budgets of the remaining part of the executive branch, as well as the two other branches of this government? And that question I'm going to ask when we get into the questioning period. But I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity. I think that I have to follow the speaker with regards to the authority and the authorizations that are being provided to help to see whether this can become a win-win. And I think that's the whole process, and what we're looking at here is how do we make this win-win for everybody. At the same time, and I'm sure that Mr. Aitino would appreciate this. I think this is the first time that the DOE is going to be able to go into the next school year recognizing what they're going to be getting for that school year. So I thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be, of course, I'll be asking some questions during the questioning period. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Senator Blas. Senator Rodriguez?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I was just corrected. I would reserve my comment until we get to the section
Okay.
that I have questions for.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Senator Ada. Tom, that is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to commend your committee for the work that you've done on the amendments made to Bill 257. Of course, in looking through this, there's a couple of major questions that actually comes to mind, and that is that, and I think Ms. Taitano addressed it, but I didn't quite catch that. And that is, I know that DOE ultimately came back in and said they needed $234 million. Bill 257 here is proposing 216 million. So I'm just really curious what is not being funded by that 260, for that difference between the 216 and the 234. And then the second question that comes to mind is, I guess last year there was some creative shifting of funds wherein $60 million of ARA money was used to basically replace $60 million of local funds that had been paid for personnel. And so my question is, where is that $60 million? Is it part of this budget or what? And then, of course, as we go along, I do have other more specific questions, and we'll get to that as we get through each section. But those are really the two major questions that I have in this bill, which I think of a general nature probably needs to be addressed.
Thank you very much, Senator Tometa. Any other comments? There being no further, General Senator Mooney Barnes.
Situos Masi, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity to speak, and Talawani Situos Taling and Barry, thank you for being here to present. First of all, Mr. Chair, I just want to thank you and your committee for your hard work in making sure that this committee report was submitted, and realizing that the hard work that they put into this, I know came with some sleepless nights. So I just want to say thank you to your staff for a job well done, and of course the author of the legislation who saw it fit to make sure that we never forget that education is important for all our children. And as I say that, and as I look at what is presented here and the additions to what is addressed here in the substituted bill, I want to say I'd like to say that 12 million additional more is realizing that what is requested here is that education is the priority, our children are the priority, and that no child will be left out in this presentation. And I'd like to say to the folks from UMATIC that they truly have shown to us that that all the things that count can't always be counted. And with this process that we realize that education really does count, and we have to provide it for our children. And I did have a couple of questions in reference to how you talked about your requests, Ms. Tulling, about the $7.4 million for prior year obligation, and then the $4 million for the teacher furlough. And I guess that's just something as we go on with the presentation of the bill, that I'll see what's being developed, and if there's any further questions to that, there may be some other things that have been already approved for the 2011 budget, and it just has to do with the actual allotment proportionate to DOE and where we're at today with that. So I guess when we go on round 2 and round 3, Mr. Speaker, that I'll go ahead and ask my questions then. Losizuo Masi for giving me the opportunity to speak.
This is Masi, Senator Munya Barnes. Any other general comments on the bill? If not, we'll go ahead then and go through the questions to the Guam Department of Education officials as it relates to the bill. We'll go maybe section by section, and then when we get to a section that you may have a question on, then you may just go ahead and ask. So section 1, the title of the bill. Okay, no objections. Section 2, legislating findings and intent. Speaker Wampat.
Mr. Chairman, I think then that maybe the additional information that was relayed to us from the board, that we incorporate, you see, their decision-making, and that it's not necessarily, as they said, strictly on the basis of the Evergreen study, so that be reflected.
All right, so there would be a motion to then amend the intent where it mentions the $150,000 savings, that we incorporate the testimony given by Mr. Meade. Mr. Meade, reflecting the other elements of the decision, such as the total funding for the school be incorporated in there. Any objection to that? Senator Blas? No objections? That was a motion, and that will be carried, and we'll work with, yeah. And then, okay, section 2, Senator Blas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, Mr. Chair, that's the appropriate time to recognize, and as far as the concern that I have with regards to, and maybe the question that can be directed to Mr. Badassi. Chris, and I recognize and I appreciate all the work that you and the committee, as well as working with the administration, and being able to come up with the projected figures, and as far as the revenues. And if I'm correct, by reading it here, we have a projection of about $681,707,396 for total operations, right?
That's correct, for
Okay.
the general fund and special fund revenues.
And is part of that monies that we, or part of that projection inclusive of what we anticipate to be receiving from federal funding sources?
Not federal matching funds, but it is inclusive of the school lunch program,
Okay, well,
which are federal funds.
Now that said, and recognizing what has happened basically over the last 72 hours at least, with regards to the whole discussion, national discussion about the debt ceiling, and then as far as the cuts and discussions that are going to continue and are going to happen, is there a possibility that could have an impact to what these figures represent? Does this figure also represent an anticipation of increased activity, let's say, from military buildup?
I'm not completely
from
sure.
any- from-
We
from-
do know that it does from a presentation that was given at the Special Accounting Service.
Right.
So they had a prevailing economic variable in there, specifically noted as part of the military buildup.
Okay, so, well, and let me qualify this, it's not only military buildup, but Milcon in general. I
Or,
mean,
let me correct that. I'm not completely sure if it was military buildup or military construction.
Okay.
So, I mean, I would say there's a difference.
And not to say, and you know, again, I appreciate all the work that has been placed in. And nobody could have anticipated at the time that we were having all the discussions and putting all the models together. Matter of fact, I don't think there is a model that exists that will take into consideration what we anticipate could happen and will happen over the next couple of weeks nationally that can impact us. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I reserve it in as far as recognizing and wanting to work with this figure, recognizing though that, and hopefully the body recognizes that this figure could drastically change, and that as a result of the change in this figure may cause us to have to come back in and make some readjustments to these figures. And I need to state this for the record so that it basically, again, it's not to the fault of anybody. And I'm sure that the due diligence was put into being able to come up with as best the projections that we could with the information and the models that we have and that exist. But I also have to caution that because of what has happened, which is way beyond any forces that we can predict or that we can influence, that this could cause a major shift, if you will, I hate to say this, but it may cause some drastic reductions, which is going to cause us to have to come back in. And so, along those lines, Mr. Speaker, you know, I'm not wanting to be able to shift this because, again, I recognize that in the here and now, that is the figure. But it could change down the road, and just so that the body recognizes as official record for the hearing that we may have to come in to be able to make some of those adjustments. And I think with regards to Section 2, that's the concern that I have with that, with that right there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate those concerns expressed by the minority leader, but I don't believe we're attempting to adopt a revenue projection for FY 2012. And what this $681,000 figure represents is what the governor believes will be the revenue collections for the upcoming fiscal year. And so based on what we just heard, I'm not sure he's going to move to make an amendment to delete this number. I would caution against that, because I'd really want us to capture this $681 million figure to be what the governor believes will be the revenue projections for the upcoming fiscal year. And so we're not adopting a revenue level, and what is presented before us in the substitute version is to really make us put our money where our mouths are in terms of what we believe should be the adequate funding for the Department of Education.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Speaker Wampat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. On the same lines in which previous Senator Blosset was inquiring on the change that may take place in Congress, where if because of the failing economy that they may not then or may short or cut out some programs, federal programs that Guam should receive. So therefore, my question, however, now would be to Tulling, is that the awarding of the special education grants and the consolidated grants, have those been awarded then for the new school year? Because maybe that would help us too, because the fear always is that under these federal grants that individuals' personnel have been picked up, and with the condition that it is federal funds, and should the federal funds run low, then that means then that those individuals, cannot continue in those programs, or the requirement of a local match for federal dollars. So can you just give us some information in terms of when the awarding of the grant has taken place? Is this would the monies then be available for the new fiscal school year, and or do you anticipate a shortfall in federal dollars?
Our application for the next round of consolidated grants has been submitted, and in fact, we had a conference call with them on Tuesday, and we have another call on Friday to go through the application and make changes as requested by USDOE. And I'm hoping once those changes are agreed to that they will provide feedback fairly quickly. With regard to the special education grant for the next fiscal year, we have not had any indication from USDOE as to where we are with that, but I can follow up, ma'am.
Senator Blas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just as a point of clarification and for the edification of my good colleague from Gang Heights, I wasn't going to make an amendment, and I just wanted to, bring that information to the body because to recognize, and like I said, the here and now that's the figure.
Right.
But that because of the external forces, and thank you, Tolling, for being able to. So, but along those lines, can I just one question, Mr. Chair? So
Sure.
we don't know whether or not there has been an increase or decrease or reduction of federal funding as a result of the applications put in.
At this point, we're projecting at least flat funding.
Pardon me?
We're projecting at least flat funding. We're not anticipating any significant decreases in our federal funds.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Any other comments on Section 2? None. We're now on Section 3, which is the appropriation levels in the base operating budget. I have Senator Dueñas to begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Tolling, I'm concerned that in the budget, there's not a provision for John F. Kennedy at the $1.56 million that I know and have been briefed by Gita is in the financing arm that was negotiated, and that there has been a request that Department of Education put that in their funding request. Now, I want to be clear that, at least in the presentation that I've had from Gita as recent as moments ago, that this is a budgeted budget item. And it's simply that the Department of Education should put it in their budget, and perhaps in an asterisk or in a miscellaneous appropriation to indicate, and even with language, that Gita has assured them that the funding is there through the financing mechanism that was negotiated when John F. Kennedy was negotiated for construction. So can you speak to that, and will you be including that as part of this request?
Mr. Badassi, maybe Mr. Badassi can respond.
Sure, Chris, that's fine.
So it's going to appear in the actual Bill 145 as part of the debt service payment to John F. Kennedy. So that portion of Bill 145 will increase by the $1.568 million. That's the intention at this time.
Okay, and so, but still to be administered by the Department of Education, so that relationship is clear between DOE and the individuals that are performing the lease.
I mean, it could be put in the DOE section of the budget, but the appropriation would have to be made, I believe, to DOA, who pays all the bond debt service.
Okay, so then, so then it will be in the full budget package as we go forward?
Yes.
And DOE won't have a problem in terms of their ability to pay and their requirements?
That's correct, because they cut the checks for those payments anyway.
Mr. Speaker, Chris, and thank you very much. At least you can have that assurance now, then Tolling also, and Mr. Barry Mead, that JFK is covered. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Dueñas. Any other questions? Senator Adak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess this would be the appropriate section then to ask that question as to where is that $60 million of local funds that was supposed to be set aside for CIPs, I guess, at the schools.
Do you want to answer?
Yes, we'll get Ms. Taitanu to answer your question, Senator Ada, and then we'll also have OFB add to her answers based upon the review.
Okay.
Okay.
About a month ago, the department submitted reprogramming requests to the governor's office for the state fiscal stabilization funds to reprogram 60 million of those funds that were previously identified as CIPs into personnel. That was related to a public law that was passed. The reprogramming request has been submitted to the USDOE, and we're still waiting for their approval. My understanding is that they're having a conference call tomorrow with the governor's office, and they should be able to provide an update on the review or the approval.
If then that request is approved, how much do we have in here for? How much do we have in here basically for capital improvements? Would that then be, for example, I don't know, maybe under contractual services? Is that where you got $18 million here? Where do you have any? Do you have any line item here which would fund for the kinds of capital improvements that $60 million would have taken care of?
Senator Ada, maybe we can
Okay,
shed some light.
and I guess what I'm getting at
Yes.
is if you have $10 million here for replacement of roofs and whatnot, that's
Is
going to
that-
be $10 million that's available, and then what happens to them?
Right. So Mr. Badassi will give you an accounting of some of the reductions and where they occurred between the 216 and the 234.
Okay. Just, I need one clarification on the, did you say the teacher furlough was included?
Was not.
In your 234 number?
No,
It was not, okay. Okay. So, from what I can kind of eyeball as far as the difference between the 234 million and the 216, about 6 million is from payroll, about 4 million, maybe 4.5 million from the school lunch program, which is not any local funding, I'm sorry, let me check that. There is a $1.9 million local appropriation for the school lunch program. And then on top of that, there's a $4 million increase as well, related to the federal funding source. And then the JFK was $1.5 million. And at this time, that's all I can realize, figure out based on this. But we can go back and try to reconcile the number completely. But it's approximately 15 million that we've identified so far, right? Or
Point of information, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Darling, I remember in the workup meetings that we had, when we were discussing that very number as well, that 234, you mentioned that that was representative of the overall school system's view of mandates and what, in other words, meaning if they were to be able to completely do everything that they wanted to do as they viewed the mandates, was a 234 number. And then we worked down from there to the realization of the current budget levels and what we could realize in terms of, is that correct?
The 269 that was originally passed by the board was developed through collaboration from the schools and various division heads, and that number was based on meeting all the mandates. The 234 number was what we believe we would need to hire all of the warm bodies currently in place, plus all the essential contracts, cover utilities.
And if I could just maybe just make this one comment before we get to Senator Yamashita. The approach on the 234 or on this 216 number is different. The committee, OFB, looked at going from current expenditure to cover the current services being provided, and then growth needed, such as increased power rates, 3 million. And so we went from the current expenditure and worked up to get to the 216. We didn't go from 234 and back it down to 216. So what this represents is the current expenditure level and what we needed, we felt in consultation with DOE, to increase those categories from the current level to account for those increases, like the increments, like the power rates, and other costs that are going to increase. We increased their contractual a little bit and also, so it went from current up, not from 234 down. So we couldn't tell you what, I couldn't very specifically tell you what's the difference between the 216 and the 234, but I can tell you what's the difference between current and 216. So just as an approach.
Thank you, and I understand that. I understand that. I mean, I think you've explained that very well. It's just that I was concerned, what was that gap between the 16 and the 34? And I think you had mentioned earlier, Mrs. Taitano, that part of that gap was the amounts owed to vendors. And so then, if that gap is not funded, are we then just kind of blowing that off?
No, the prior period expense was included as part of the initial funding, the 260. As we moved downward, those were some of the things that were left off the list. But I just wanted to remind everybody that that was not included in the funding level. So as I get calls from, various constituents and senators to fund, prior period expense, part of my problem is it's not in the budget. So
in other words, whatever has not been paid up to this date then is probably not going to get paid. Is that a fair statement?
I believe that there's some room in the public law says if we can find some savings, then we can use that to fund prior period. But, the reality is that...
Do you have any idea how much that amount is of outstanding payables?
7.4, but that includes $4 million of the teacher furlough, and the court case on that, hasn't been completed.
Okay. All right. Can I ask my second question on this one? And that is then I think on the question of the $60 million, I think OFB was going to answer that part.
Yeah. There's only only 227,000 in this budget for capital equipment. I don't believe that is anything that was planned as part of the ERA $60 million worth of projects. Yes. Yeah. So to my knowledge, there's nothing in there because most of that money is reserved for large capital projects over, I think, $1 million, right? So this money probably represents just regular repairs of the schools and maybe some capital purchases of trucks and things like that.
Senator Adams? Okay.
Well, just one final question then. If that shifting of $60 million is approved, then that's a windfall of $60 million. Then that's in the local coffers, correct?
No, because that $60 million goes to a trust account to do the ARA projects.
Okay, and does that require further legislative action?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes. Senator Yamashita?
Thank you, Speaker Ben. And actually, I just wanted to raise some of the points that the previous speaker was asking about, that the ARA monies are already answered for, that the roof repairs, the leaking ceilings, the air conditioning units. I mean, those are the big ticket items that the $60 million is supposed to go towards, which is why I think we don't see a lot of the CIP projects reflected in our local budget. And Speaker Ben was the one who helped figure out a way to save the $60 million because we were running behind time in actually getting the bids out and getting the monies appropriated is not the right word, but encumbered, thank you. And so then, Madam Superintendent, from the $7.4 million, and we're still in court for the teacher furlough for 4, that means we need $3.4 million for prior year expenditures, right? And I know that, so then we took that money out as we tried to continue to whittle our budget away. But as we know, those folks have gone through arbitration in court, there's interest that grows too if they're the amounts that they should be awarded. And so I'm hoping that we really will be able to make it a priority, not only because they're due what they're due, but because it's the ticket amount increases every year. So I'm not really sure what the answer is to that, and maybe Speaker Ben can can help us figure that one out, but that's something that I think really does need to be addressed.
Okay. Yes.
In line with that also, one of the suggestions when we were having the budget review with the board was that for the prior year expenditures and with the furlough and those types of things, these things are in the budget every year from DOE. Every year they're in the budget. Every year they get passed in the budget, but every year they don't get funded. So one of the recommendations that was made during our discussions was that don't put them in the budget. Budget what we need for the operation of the department for this coming year. Take the prior obligations, put them in a separate request, in a supplemental request, and hopefully have that supplemental request approved and given to the department in a lump sum, if you will, to where the department can then just pay them, be done with them, and be clean with them. Because what is this? How many years has these things been put in a budget every year? And they haven't been either haven't been budgeted or the money hasn't been released to the department to clear them. So what that would do is you could say, okay, well actually if we're taking that out of the budget, it reduces the annual budget to its reality, and then it clears up the past debt. And then that won't show again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mead. Speaker Wampat, did you just want to?
Yes, I just really want to make a correction here, because I don't want the public to think that the legislature has never really addressed it. We did in the Camacho administration. I had actually put in an amendment to pay for the teacher furlough. The money was identified. Unfortunately, the governor used it at that time for the landfill. Then we did include it again in the budget, the last fiscal year as well, that when the governor goes out to borrow monies, that then these are the priorities, and the teacher furlough was definitely on the top of the priority. And then the third time was when there were any other additional monies that are to come into the government, then the teacher furlough again would be addressed. But unfortunately, many times we've made the attempts, even with funding, unfortunately, that's all we can do is appropriate, and it's only the governor then who eventually release the money.
Yeah, so we have proposed, we have appropriated. It's just that it hasn't been disposed of. So, Senator Yamashita, you still have the floor.
So, Speaker Ben, does that mean then, since it has been passed into law, and even though it's prior year, if the current governor wanted to make a payment, that he could, if he was able to identify the monies, or is that since it's past budget, it no longer?
Right. No, he actually used the authority and spent it on some other, transferred that. So it's no longer available because he's transferred that authority. So we have to redo it, and we're providing them an opportunity in this bill for some flexibility. Okay. Okay. Senator Blas, did you have additional questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Talking with regards to the school lunch program here, and I understand that as a result of a new contract that has been signed, does this funding here represent basically the amounts that are going to be awarded because Sodexo says they anticipate or they can increase, the school lunch program enrollments by, they say they can bring in 80% more, but I understand from OFB that we reduced this to 25%?
That's correct. We reduced the number. The numbers that we had seen from the exhibit of the contract.
What was the original contract amount for?
You want to speak to this one? I'm not.
I believe it was about $9 million.
Okay.
So the new contract actually has a lower per meal cost, but because they're projecting that they're going to sell more meals, the anticipated cost of the contract will actually be higher. We've actually projected 14. And so I believe I heard Mr. Badassi say that he believes that to be too optimistic and had lowered the projections to 10.
Yeah, because the 14 was based on 80% of the students eating lunch at the school cafeterias in the high school level. And right now, the participation is 20%.
So it's 80% of 80% more on top of the 20%?
No, from 20% participation to 80% participation.
That's really ambitious.
That's why we lowered the projections a little bit.
We did tell them that we believed it was ambitious.
Sure, I
They
understand.
said that they have had experience in a district of similar size where they were able to move those
So were they
participation
basing
rates
that
up.
this increase in 80% from 20% to 80% was going to happen on the first day of school, or was this going to be something progressive? You know, because I can understand, in as far as paying for the meals, you know, right at the first day of school, there are going to be some kids. But are we paying for services based on their idea that they can bring in 80% of, you
It's
know?
per meal sold. So
Pardon?
it's per meal sold.
Per meal
So
sold.
we would only pay for
So
what-
in essence, if they don't meet this match, we're only going to pay per meal sold.
Yes.
So this is something, we don't get an advance bill from them,
Right, that's correct.
okay? And so if they don't meet this match, and let's say they don't even meet the conservative match, okay?
Right, then
As provided.
they'll have,
Then
DOE
they'll
will
have-
have extra money in.
Okay. Then they have, okay. That,
No, we won't, because we won't get
I'm a little bit more confident in that. Secondly, is with regards to this appropriation, and this is the question actually to Mr. Berdassi. And in your presentation, and you says that you went from, you didn't go from 234 to 215, you went from, what was the baseline figure in this for 176? What was the spend rate and actual? Is that what you went by? Your
Correct. We went with the 9
actual
months.
plus projected? for the
9 month
end of the-
actuals and 3 months projected.
And what was that figure?
I believe the tracking, if you include the education's jobs funds, it was roughly 173,
Okay.
somewhere in there.
So
Or, I'm
we-
sorry, it would be more like 193.
193.
So 193 to 215 DI math. 22?
Success for all.
Huh?
I'm sorry.
Okay. My colleague from PD is in
By
here, so I've
27.
got to, you know, ask the question in this regard, because that's how he would have answered that
Approximately
anyways.
20 million.
Pardon me?
Approximately 20.
Approximately 20. So, you know, and so in recognition, Mr. Chair, that in the governor's submission, actually now the budget as proposed in front of us is a $10 million increase from the administration's proposal.
For the local funding source. Again, the increase in the school lunch revenues in the budget don't really affect the local funding source. So
Okay.
we don't really count that. So it's looking at the local appropriation only when we say the $10 million.
Okay, so local appropriations only $10 million. My concern though now is recognition in the front end that we're using the governor's revenue projections. And in the revenue projections, I'm sure that when the budget was, or when the bill was submitted, there was that accountability as to where all this money was going to be going. What was the corresponding decrease then on the other side? You know, if we were to increase the education budget by 10 million, what was the corresponding decrease on the other side?
We're still working through that. We had met with the administration last week and brought these concerns up, and we're waiting for them to come back to us with a response. However, OFB has identified about 356 vacant positions on the executive branch side only, and the total dollar amount that was in the budget for those 356 vacancies was approximately $11.6 million. So those are positions that are not funded today as current operations.
Okay, well, maybe I can talk to you offline with regards to this to get this thing moving, Chris, because I'm a little bit uncomfortable with regards to the corresponding decrease on the other side. I just want to make sure that we're not, you know, let's not cut off our noses despite our face with regards to, now we've got $10 million less on the other side, and, you know, we haven't spoke about the judiciary budget or our budget, you know, for that matter. Okay, and where is that corresponding decrease going to come from? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Blas. Any other questions on Section 2? We're now on that was Section 3. We're on Section 4. In Section 4, again, these are based now on formula-driven, on the increments and the promotions, based upon the staffing pattern and when the individual positions are due increments, and then DOE's promotions schedule and anticipated there. And then the reclassification, these are, if I remember correctly, teachers who earn additional degrees or get certifications are due increases. And so this is a projection that came from the Department of Education. Section 5 is the Chamorro Studies Division. This is a, I'm sorry. Speaker Wampat?
Just wanted to make sure that this is the current, the actual dollar amount, there's no reduction in the...
This was the budget for that department in the 234 submission, the 234 million. So that was fully funded according to that.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay. We're now on the miscellaneous funding provision of the bill for the Guam Department of Education. The interscholastics program, again, these are levels that are at the current levels, no change. The junior ROTC, we don't have a specific amount of that. We've never done a specific amount because it depends on the rank of the instructor and how much is reimbursed on the federal side. So we never know unless we that gets filled. So that could change, but we just do isolate that those program funds reimbursement for the program. The Section 8, again, this is from the indirect costs fund of federal grants, and it allows DOE to implement programs that will take us off the high-risk status. The summer school program, again, this is just the authorization to spend the revenues generated by summer school. Summer school is self-supporting, if I'm not mistaken.
It's been funded by the consolidated grant in the last couple of years.
All right, so in the last years, those are federal funds?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So these are federal fund programs. The textbooks and collateral material, this again is based upon the submitted budget and funds it as an advance appropriation. Senator Yamashita.
Thank you very much, Speaker Ben. Madam Superintendent, I wonder if you would be open to amending this language a little bit and ensuring that we are able to buy musical instruments with this monies. I visited a band room a couple of weeks ago, and the actual instruments at FBLG Middle School are being held together by masking tape and electrical tape. And it's been like that for a few years. So I wonder if you would be open to amending that, Speaker Ben, to include musical instruments, and then they decide.
Oh, okay. So there's a motion to amend the permitted uses for the textbooks and collateral materials to include the purchase of musical instruments.
So software, sheet music, musical instruments, and music books.
Yes. Any objections to that? Any discussion?
I don't
Speaker
have
Wampat?
I don't have any objections to that at all. It's just I wanted to make sure, though, that the object category in which that is to be placed under, because equipment are definitely not, textbooks. So we would need to make sure then
Okay.
that the appropriate language then is put in, and that although I know it is for school a specific school that's mentioned, but that there are others as well, and that of course will be left to the superintendent to determine,
Okay.
just as well as to allocate accordingly to the school needs.
Yes, okay, all right. So no objections with your noted comments from the speaker, okay? The next section is the website posting. And again, these are reporting requirements for transparency policy that this government, the department, and of course the administration have all supported in the past. So no changes to the website posting requirements. Section 12 are other reports, and again, that they shall be in the electronic format, and they're given to the Magalahinguahan and the Speaker of the Legislature in Guam. No changes. Speaker Wampat, on the reports?
No, I don't have any change, but Madam Superintendent, if you can tell us, have you seen whether this specific language has helped, and is there any savings to the department in the past
Yeah,
since this legislation?
You know, I need to go back and talk to my division head because, as I recall, we're submitting this in hard copy. So I need to go back and remind them that we're allowed to provide it electronically.
Because I think it's important that we know. I mean, we continually put it, but we're not getting any kind of feedback, and we're hoping that this would assist the department in terms of having, you know, available monies for your disposal.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Senator Munoz-Barnes.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I apologize. I had just stepped out of the room for a minute, and I wanted to ask a question to our acting superintendent on Section 10 regarding the collateral materials and textbooks.
Sure.
If it's all right. Ms. Tulling, in the efforts of the appropriations for Guam Department of Education for the textbooks, has the Education Department decided or has worked on, I guess, going green in as far as the textbooks? I know that, I mean, I don't want to bring out some old, hard memories in reference to textbooks being purchased and not being utilized. And I know that there was supposed to be a plan from that division to see what we would do to save more funds, start going through the internet as technology grows, and usually getting materials online based on what's there, what is being utilized today, I guess, around the nation. Has DOE thought of planning for that and using less, or I guess saving trees and using less textbooks? Because already for several years we found textbooks that were bought, purchased, and we spend each year, I think, $3 million, and they're not being utilized and just being used for bookshelves. I know this is not, I'm just hoping that.
A lot of the ARA money that we've received is identified to be used for technology. So we'll be putting interactive whiteboards in our classrooms, providing laptops to our teachers so they can use the internet to bring in resources into the classrooms. We are working to bring, we are looking at ebooks. Part of our problem with ebooks is our current law requires that we follow the adopted textbooks, and a lot of the textbooks that we have previously adopted don't have electronic versions. So one of the things we're considering is piloting one of our schools so that they would use ebooks, and so because of the piloting, we wouldn't have to follow the adopted standards. But part of our problem in looking for ebooks is trying to match the adopted textbooks against what's available electronically, and a lot of the textbooks that we've adopted aren't available at this point in that format.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Barnes. Senator Mabini, and then Senator Mabini, and then you talk, Senator. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in line with my colleague from Manilao, going back to the e-books, as a matter of fact, the speaker and I are looking at one of our neighboring islands who have implemented iClassrooms, and where teachers and students are simultaneously learning how to utilize ebooks. The interesting point, and I think that we need to consider this, is that, and this is what I wanted to explore with those leaders, are what was the significant cost savings, because now they're not shipping books in, nor are they worried about books being lost or whatnot. So it's a significant cost savings. But on top of that, I think what's important is that the teachers would be able to start using the technology, and correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Superintendent, the ARROW money will or may be providing the laptops for the students. Is that something that we can forecast this school year?
This school year, we should be providing laptops to all our teachers, and we have identified money for mobile labs in the classrooms, and we are. Part of the problem that we've had is that the third party has asked us to delay purchasing laptops for the students until we're able to get a handle on our security. So that's a big concern for them, to spend millions of dollars on computer equipment and then have them walk out of the classroom. So we're trying to grapple with that before we make any significant expenditures for student laptops.
And just for clarification, at least one of this is Palau, by the way, that their local textbook providers actually had a lot of their textbooks just recently digitized, so they're now jumping on the bandwagon so they can join this effort. So I hope the DOE will seriously consider that. There'll be significant cost savings as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Senator Mini. Senator Tom Atta.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, maybe if Mrs. Taitano can just clarify, these ebook readers, and I'm glad that the DOE is, shifting in that direction there, but does this open up for the school can now buy iPads?
Part of our dilemma is what do we buy the hardware and then buy the software? Do we buy the software and then buy the hardware? So we're exploring those kinds of things. Textbooks can either be purchased in a flat file where it's it's just an electronic book and you're just flipping through it. There's also media that allows you to be interactive, go to the internet, but part of that would require the child to have access to the internet either at home or some other public place. So we're looking at all the different options, and again, what I think we would plan to do is pilot that in one of our schools and make sure we work out all the kinks before we try to deploy that district-wide.
I understand. I just raised that question because just several weeks ago there was a big hoopla made about a certain government agency purchasing iPads, which can be used for reading ebooks. And if that is the intention here, is to allow also the purchase of iPads to accommodate this technology, then somehow we've got to reflect it so that nobody goes busting a blood vessel if the department chooses to do that. So if nothing else, it's on record then that it is the intent of DOE that if iPads is the mode that they want to go to, then iPads will be authorized under this Section 10. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator Atta. We'll check with that pilot program at DOA. Speaker Wampak.
Thank you very much again for the opportunity, and I just thought of something. Yes,
Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much. And I just, Taling, I wanted to ask you, because the legislature passed legislation then extending the adoption of the textbooks now from 5 to 7 years, because there are certain subjects that they just don't change. Grammar, never change. The rules are always the same. It's primarily science and social studies. But the point here is that by the time the department then adopts and then purchases the textbooks, it's 1 year later. So 1 year already of that adoption year has actually gone through. And that's many times after that point already, the teachers really don't use the textbooks. And we see the textbooks boxes, brand new boxes of textbooks that remain in closets and book rooms and eventually at the warehouse outside, or actually then were considered surveyed and sent to the islands. So my question I wanted to ask you, since it's 1 year later after the purchase, that whether the policy then can be made that the running time for that adoption, Barry, too, is that it now goes from the point of, not so much the adoption 1 year earlier, but after when the textbooks come in. Is that something that maybe could be considered, or and it really would have to be more of a policy, I think, rather than us again going back to amend the law, and that's why I wanted to ask.
One of the things the previous superintendent pointed out to the board was a problem with our textbook ordering, was our textbook adoption process. So we will be addressing, hopefully in September, the adoption process to where we're not paying teachers to come in and adopt the textbook. It's part of their job. So once we remedy the problem of how we analyze textbooks and how we recommend which textbooks to use and adopt them, we can then move forward with the process of how we order, when we order, and so that we have them and have the proper textbook for the proper length of time. I think that answers your question, correct? Yes, ma'am.
Speaker, is that? Okay. Thank you very much. Any more questions on the textbook issue? If not, we'll go back to where we had reverted, and we're now at Section 13, Utilities Reduction Incentive. Senator Blas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess for a point of clarification here, do we utilize the power and water pool in as far as the budget for DOE?
No, DOE gets its own. It's not part of the cost utility pool. They get their own appropriation for water. I mean, for water and power.
Okay, but in getting their own appropriation as the agency, then does it further get broken down by school?
Yes. Yes. There are meters assigned to each school.
But so does each school have its own responsibility of paying its own power and water bill?
What happens is the budget as we passed here by this legislature, which sets the object categories, by law, the Guam Department of Education and the board then go back and take that those and allocate it to the schools. So they would go back and take this $13 million in power, for example, and they would say $1 million of that is for GW, 800,000 for Atacao, whatever.
Okay, and
So.
you know, don't get me wrong, this is a great program, and as far as reduction incentive, you know, and I hope that it is that schools do look in being able to reduce its water and power consumption. My concern is you have one school that does this and is successful in bringing it down below 15%. Yet for another reason, and I'm not going to explain as to what could or what may happen, another school experiences a 16, 17, 20% increase. My concern is at the end of the day, as we put out in the law, as if this school is anticipating, you know, an incentive, a reward as a result of being able to meet this incentive. Two things. One, if there is no money there, then it's an empty promise. But then, if there is money there, my concern though is that are we putting, this obviously is going to be a prior year obligation, because if you're not going to be able to pay this off until the next fiscal year.
No, it's at the end of each quarter. So at the end of each quarter, they true up the bill.
Yeah, but it says to reduce
compared
their
against
annual utility consumption, the annual.
Right, from last year's consumption.
So you're going to compare so we're going to compare apples out May, let's say May 2011 to May 2010. That's what we're looking at.
Right. If they're able to reduce their annual consumption measured each quarter. So it's kind of like a rolling quarter.
Uh-huh.
So from the previous quarter.
Okay. That said though, okay, so then let's go from the fourth to the first quarter.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, you see what I'm getting at?
Sure.
And so
there may be that one quarter lapse that extends into the next fiscal year. You're correct.
yeah, and so I'm a little concerned there because I mean that's the start of your school year primarily, and that's actually the time that you want to start the programs. And so if I don't want to start a program for a year that doesn't meet, if they start in the first quarter of a fiscal year is like the second quarter or the first quarter of a school year. Okay, and I don't want a school to be I guess I don't want to say disgruntled, but, I don't want to, for dismayed that they weren't able to capture that because, you're going from fourth quarter to first quarter.
Yeah.
Okay?
I understand you.
So, looking at maybe there, and maybe we can fashion an amendment to be able to recognize that, because it is a good program. I just want to make sure that, if the schools does this, then they have something to look for. Okay? So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I have Senator Muñoz-Barnes and then Senator Respicio and then Senator Adams.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Speaker, I just want to note as I look at Section 13 and look at how we encourage the practice of energy conservation, it says here that any school whose principal and staff is able to reduce their annual utility consumption by at least 15% of their prior annual billing measured each quarter for each utility type shall have that dollar value of savings transferred from the utility pool to their respective schools. My only concern is that they would probably have to do more than 30% based on the increase from CCU that just happened. And I just wanted to note that for the record, that the utilities have just increased tremendously, and the effect is, so I would literally put more of an incentive pool in here to seeing what we could get. But the idea is good, the concept is right, and it's just that the principals and the staff would probably have to work 2 or 3 times harder than it is today, because for me personally, in our household, we use less power but paid several $100s more. And my husband said, I thought we were saving. I thought we bought new air cons. And I said, no, they just increased the rate. So just food for thought.
Yes. Thank you very much. Senator Respicio?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I've seen the provision of Section 13 in previous budgets, and I want to recognize your persistence in trying to have DOE implement something like this. As a matter of fact, I think we've talked about trying to have this kind of language be able to reflect for the other departments and agencies, because in order for Section 13 to work, we all know that the governor has to give the Department of Education its full allotment, and we also know that the Department of Education cannot shortchange reduce that school's budget by that amount, then give them the 15% rebate to say because you saved your power, and then yet they see a reduction in the budget allotted to that particular school. And so there really has to be a commitment on the part of the administration, the Department of Administration rather, and the Guam Department of Education to make something like this work. Fortunately for us here in the legislature, because we have our own budget, Mr. Chairman, we've been able to go from $21,000 a month down to about $15,000 a month, but that is not a savings for us, and for our branch it's a cost avoidance. It just means that we can take that $6,000 a month that we didn't have to remit to GPA and use that for payroll or to catch up on the allotments that we're still waiting for DOA. So even in the legislature, you can dress me down as much as you want, but we're hand to mouth. Yeah. And we're struggling to try to even meet our own obligations to our own employees in this branch of government. And so I appreciate the stresses that the Madam Superintendent and board member there have to go through on a daily basis. Every time we hear that the executive branch needs to make payroll, it's not really payroll for the line agencies, it's payroll for Department of Education alone. And so I want this provision to work. I think if the principals and teachers realize that if they look at the session hall, it's not very cold because we're regulating the temperature. I mean, if the classrooms do the same, Mr. Chairman, if they turn off the lights as they go home or turn off the computers, we could realize a substantive amount of savings just to the power bill. And I bet you DOE alone, even if DOE can realize this savings and have that meet its own budget shortfalls, I think there'll be an incentive in and of itself. But DOE's fear, I'm sure, is that whatever they don't spend on their power bill, the governor will reduce that amount correspondingly. And so there's been no incentive to act like we're one government, and anywhere you save here, someone can feel that benefit of it. But I think our teachers and our employees just feel like the more they save and the more they sweat it out in the classrooms and the offices, there's no incentive. It just means that they just sweat it out in the offices and the classrooms. And so I hope that you don't give up on this provision and we find a way to apply this across the entire government of Guam. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Espicio. Senator Ada? Tom? And then Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a technical amendment on page 9 there, line 22, that probably we should add after the word consumption, in parentheses, kilowatts and gallons. Otherwise, somebody may decide to take a look at the reduction in terms of dollars. And so whatever they reduce could easily be offset by an increase in your surcharges or whatever.
Okay.
So it's just a simple technical amendment.
All right. So there's an amendment being proposed by Senator Adat on line 22, page 9, after the word consumption, to add kilowatts or gallons. Any objections? No objections? That amendment passes. Senator Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to ask Madam Superintendent, this is a very good program, but to strengthen it, is there a program in place to, or any efforts in place to retrofit classrooms with, with energy efficient lights? I think there was a study done, right, a few years ago on giving recommending the department on how to cut, their energy and water expenses.
Well, there's a couple of things we're doing. Some of the money that we're getting through the ARA, or the $60 million that we're talking about, is to repair the envelope of the building so they can be more energy efficient. We're going to be sealing the roofs. We're going to be replacing windows and doors. And if we have money left over, we're going to try to take a look at the air conditioning systems. We've been approached by GPA. They've hired a contractor that's coming in to do energy audits. And part of the work that they're doing is to identify, for instance, if you retrofit all of the lights to LED, use that savings to finance the purchase of the lights. So that's something that we'll be working with GPA on. A couple of years, it was my understanding that we were going to get $1 million or so in funding from GIPA for energy efficiency projects, and that just never happened. When the outgoing director, Liz Cruz, had identified projects in a couple of our schools to replace the lighting, and then there was a change in administration. We've been told by Ms. Crisostomo that she's going to be working with us and has offered to change out lights at one of our bigger schools, but we still haven't, that hasn't come to fruition. But we are working to do projects on our own with the funding that we have.
Okay, great, thank you. I think that's to strengthen this program, we need to also look at efforts such as these.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Just for the record, the committee and the chair had asked EPA during one of the hearings where they were actually awarded $18 million in energy grants to give 8 of that to DOE. And we were told at that hearing that they were going to do it, but it hasn't shown up still. So we're still hopeful. Okay. So any other comments on Section 13? Section 14, the budgetary transfer for the Guam Department of Education. Again, this is to work with the Guam Education Policy Board, Guam Education Board, and the Educational Financial Supervisory Commission to resolve technically their code red and code watches under that provision of law and allow them to reprogram funds based upon a vote of that council. Senator Yamashita.
Thank you, Speaker Ben. I'm not sure if this fits in this category or not, but if one of our students gets into an accident on campus and ends up at GMH, is DOE in any way financially obligated to pay for the services? And the family doesn't have insurance? I wonder what happens in that regard. And unfortunately, our accidents are few and far between. But I'm wondering, and then hooked onto that, I noticed that, and I know during one of many Speaker Ben's meetings, we talked about drug testing, and there isn't anything budgeted for that. So employees are expected to pay for their own drug tests. I don't have a problem with that. But I'm wondering about the GMH scenario. What happens in that regard? An ambulance comes to the campus, takes the child.
We were actually just looking into that yesterday, as a matter of fact, and my understanding is the procedure is that the parent would file a claim with the government claim, with the AG's office as part of the Government Claims Act. So there is no specific funding in our budget for that.
Any comment? Speaker Wampat? Senator Yamashita, is that? Okay. Speaker Wampat and Senator Muñoz.
We're in section 14.
Section 14.
Okay. I understand, of course, and I think that this is great, that in order to protect the funding to the department is to make sure that only, certain funds can be transferred between object categories. The question, however, I have is now with the the FC, and is the thinking behind this then is that, because the process might be a little bit longer, of course, coming to the legislature.
That's correct.
Authorizing then this commission to be able to make decisions. Now, would this be beyond, I understand to avoid the code red, but would it be beyond a certain amount, or should there be a limited amount? I realize that these are, of course, individuals within this commission that truly have a fiduciary responsibility to government monies. But I'm just wondering whether is there any thinking in terms of providing a certain dollar amount at a given time?
Telling again, so the bill proposes, upon the request of the Department of Education, the superintendent, to allow these transfers that are to cure these code red, and in some instances these are technical, but it's still an amount. And the speaker's question, of course, is should we limit this to a cap on allowing the transfer? And I guess with yourself as one that would initiate, and EFC as one that would review and approve and act on it, what would be the reaction to the speaker's concern? Ms. Teichmann?
Well, the commission meets monthly, and it's made up of representatives from the legislature, DOA, OPA, and BBMR. In my mind, because they meet monthly and because they're intimately involved with our finances, they should be able to react quicker. So, I think this was a provision that was put in by OFB, but I don't have any problems at this point. Whether there should be a cap, I think that should be a decision left to the legislature.
We'll have Mr. Badassi comment, and then Mr. Meade will.
Certainly a cap would be, we could do a percentage of the overall budget, or and I think that would be something maybe the commission, in conjunction with the superintendent, after consulting with the board, maybe we could come up with a number. I think, though, there would be sufficient controls in place, since the request is coming from the department, and of course the legislature has a vested interest to make sure that DOE is staying within its budget, and so does the executive branch with the allotments and the cash releases. So I don't know that it would be, I don't think we would transfer money out of operations into personnel to.
Maybe Speaker, I would say I would have no objection if you were to move to eliminate this at this time, maybe. and, you know, and get some more discussion on this?
Well, yes,
And because I see your point in terms of,
and I'm also thinking too is that, you know, when certain departments and agencies would like a transfer
Right.
between object categories, that there's a process for them to go to the governor's office to request for it.
Right.
Then the governor has to submit it again to the legislature. And I think those are
Yeah.
some of the steps that are missing. So
Sure.
if we can look at that, and maybe that can be a miscellaneous provision in the total budget
But
bill.
we should move this.
So I would like them to go and make that motion and to delete section 14. It is?
yeah, so
Well,
the motion would be,
Well, I mean, I know I overheard my colleague was saying that this is the heart of, you know, the bill, and that's true, and I don't want to impede the functions of this commission, of course, in assisting the department, unless maybe we could have legal counsel, or maybe can we just take a minute recess, maybe to kind of talk amongst ourselves to maybe look at a suggested possibly either a percentage,
Yeah.
and then maybe put in the language as well, a similar process that the request be in writing and that actually is sent down to the legislature to be open so that everybody
okay.
will be able to have that information.
all right.
So, a
So
brief
the
recess.
amendment would be to structure this ability to reprogram with the same provisions as if the governor was reprogramming.
Yes,
And-
I would like
and-
that.
Okay. So
Is that-
on that amendment, it would be a technical amendment that would be drafted by the legal counsel?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you
All right,
very much.
no objections. Mr. Mead, did you have any, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I just wanted to speak to that because the process, the way it's laid out here, is if the superintendent were to provide to the board, submit via a duly adopted resolution of the board meets on a monthly basis. If this were to occur, or the need were to occur at a very specific time, it could be how long, you know, by open government rule and everything else, how long does it take for the board to convene? Then the board would have to draft the resolution and come up with a resolution and pass it. Then we would have to send it to the EFSC, who may have met yesterday, and we now wait 30 more days for that. So the existence or the expediency of being able to transfer the funds would technically be lost and could take up to 60 days. My suggestion was going to be that because of the frugality shown by the board already as to why we're here today, that a dollar amount could be put on this to where the superintendent would request of the board to be able to transfer the funds, and the board would then submit a report as to the amount of money that was transferred and why to the EFSC. Then if the EFSC decided that, well, you guys kind of like went overboard, we could be admonished or whatever. Most of the code reds that we've had to deal with already have created a problem for the department and for the board to meet the timelines necessary to make the report because of the meeting schedules and because of those other timelines. So if there was a way to where the superintendent would be able to make a limited request to the board could approve it, and then make a report to that, if people are comfortable with that, it would be something that I would suggest.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mead. We'll look at that in line with the suggested amendment or the adopted amendment to reflect those. Senator Barnes?
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'd like to do a follow-up on my good colleague, Senator Yamashita's inquiry to the superintendent in reference to the claiming process for an injured individual. I know the answer that you had given us was to, I guess, file a claim with the government's claim fund, and you and I know that that fund is almost, if not funded at all. And my concern is, I do know that there's provisions in place when an employee gets hurt within the premise of the educational property, that there's workman's comp that they could file and all. But when the student or parent gets hurt on that facility, They're told to do the process. They'll take care of it. Even the hospital has within that claim when they're checking, registering, did this happen on school grounds or what have you. But I know of a constituent who's come to me to say, you know what, 7 years later, DOE says, don't worry about it, but the hospital and the private clinic is still suing for that amount, and it's continuous every month. And every time the documents are turned into DOE, they said they can't do anything about it. And I think that we got to put something in place, and if not, even think about having some kind of insurance that we can probably look into that will provide for the student that gets hurt on those grounds. Because even if the student and the parent consents to the waiver of liability, we know that there's still liabilities to the school and to the board. So I'd like to see, has the board or, with you as superintendent, looked into protecting the students who get hurt? Because this happens on more than one occasion. And I have a case that a constituent who's come in who has not received an answer, and every time they go to the AG's office, there's nothing. They have not been answered to, and I think that this is still very critical. Please.
To answer that question, Senator Barnes, the episode that drove the question was the episode we recently had with our 300 kids that were sick and had to go to GMH, and the question came up: who's going to pay the bill? Is GDOE going to be responsible for that bill? Are we going to make the parents pay for it? Is there liability insurance by the contractor? And I agree with you. My son was injured in sports, and it took a while to be reimbursed, but we were finally reimbursed by the department. And there is no, if you will, liability insurance for the department that I know of, and I know I haven't seen that particular insurance listed in a budget. And it certainly makes sense that we somehow do that. Now, we can draft a board policy to say this is what we're going to do and this is what needs to be done, but the reality of that's going to be coming back to the legislature for a supplemental budget to budget the insurance, because it's not, the government of Guam is pretty much self-insured. But at the same time, I agree with you 100%. But it's something that needs to be fixed through a board resolution, through information from the department as to the history, and for the legislature to become concerned with, because the legislature is one that's going to appropriate the funds to support it.
Thank you, Mr. Mead. Mr. Chair, the seriousness of this, and just knowing that the most recent event that happening with our students going through the food poisoning was a factor that we as a body need to look at and work closely with the management of the education department, because I think that this should not go left. I mean, if Mr. Mead had to insist on getting reimbursed and kept going to them, that should not be the case. And I'm hoping if you could just have the opportunity for me to come back, I'll talk to
Sure.
council, and maybe I can work on an amendment that we can include into this to add a provision in reference to this matter. And if you can allow me that, I would appreciate it.
All right, we'll continue the discussion, but allow you to make that amendment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other comments on the section 14? All right, we're now on section 15. Section 15 really is an amendment that would kind of consolidate two reports that the department is currently preparing for two different bodies, and this would just allow the Education Finance Commission and Guam Department of Education to design a report in which one report will suffice for two requirements of law for submission of reports, and just make them a little bit more efficient and so forth. So that's all that is. Section 16 is a cost savings incentive, and this is for the superintendent to implement a cost savings plan to include but not limited to consolidation of programs, entities, student-teacher ratios. These are budgets, provisions that are carried over from the last budgets. Okay, Section 17, appropriation for equipment for certain DOE schools. This was a bill that was introduced as Bill 255, which would have provided for the overcrowding situation at GW, in which they needed some additional resources in order to avoid double sessions and avoid and give them maximum flexibility by providing these resources to resolve the matter there and give them options other than redistricting or double sessions. And the appropriation comes from the identification of funds identified by the governor in the supplemental appropriation budget request, in which he identified $2.6 million from the Autonomous Agencies Collection Fund, and $2.1 million was appropriated in the supplemental budget, which left this balance of $525. And so I have Senator Ada on this section. Senator Ada.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we delete Section 17A. And let's just get right to the let's get right to the point of the matter here, and that is we want to transfer funds from the Autonomous Collection Agency, and then I guess the following sections kind of gives that path as to what happens to it. But I just kala na na lebuk again, we leave it in there. So it's just the legislative findings and intent.
Okay. All right. So there's a motion by Senator Ada to delete Section A, which is legislative and findings, and then renumber the following sections appropriately and change that. Any objections? None from me. Section A is hereby deleted, and B and C are renumbered accordingly. Okay, any other?
A, well, then you'll have, so then now there'll be a section 17, A, C, and A, B, and C.
A, B, and C,
okay,
correct.
I'd like to make an amendment there on the new section C.
Okay.
On page 13.
All right.
I'm just concerned that as it stands right now, an appropriation's being made, money's available there, but there's really no, how would you put it, a sense of urgency put into it. And I would like to make an amendment to the effect that the funds shall be obligated within 90 days of enactment, not counting those days that lapse as in order to dispose of any valid procurement protests. And what all this does is it forces the department, supposedly these air conditioners are needed in the schools. And so what we're saying is, there's 90 days to get this process going. Obviously, I think DOE has identified the specifications for what it needs. Now it just needs to put out the RFP or whatever it needs to do to procure it. It goes down to GSA, or if you have your own procurement, and then, within 90 days, we have a vendor identified. Now, how long it takes him to get it on island and install it, that's a totally different story, but we just want, action to get started. So I can write this up, Mr. Chairman, and I'll get with the clerk. Okay. But basically, the amendment is, however, the funds should be obligated within 90 days of enactment, not counting those days that lapse in order to dispose of any valid procurement protests. So in other words, then, the bid gets put out, somebody protests the procurement for, what's the largest one there? Whatever it is.
So it kind of like the days don't toll for the days that it's under protest.
Correct. And there's that, the $328,000 bid is likely to be protested.
It seems that way these days, doesn't
yes.
it? Yeah. Okay, so on the amendment by Senator Ada, again, the amendment would obligate require the obligation of the funds within 90 days, and basically not counting days in which the bid or the procurement is under protest.
Correct.
Okay. on that amendment, and Senator Ada will provide the appropriate legal language with the legal counsel for that.
Okay.
No objections? Amendment passes. Any other comments on the new sections A, B, and C? If not, we'll go ahead then and go to Section 18. Section 18 is a bill that would allow the Guam Board of Education to authorize, I'm sorry, Senator Blas?
I apologize, Mr. Chair.
No problem.
With regards to actually, we're talking about sections, we've just dispensed with section 17, right? That's what you're
That's
talking
correct. That's correct.
Well, I had a question about 17B.
Oh, 17?
17B.
Sure. B, which is the new.
And actually C, actually the whole section. Where is that indicated in this?
Oh, this is from this year's revenues. It's not next year's budget. This is for this year.
This is for this year.
This fiscal year and this school year,
Okay.
right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
so thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Okay, so we're Section 18. Section 18 is a provision that would allow the board to to authorize shared human resource for school populations below 325 in fiscal years 2011 and 12. And that just gives flexibility for maximizing resources. Section 19, temporary budgetary transfer authority for Guam Department of Education for FY 2011. Mr. Badassi maybe would, if you recall in the presentation of the committee report on page 17 of there, we showed that there was a shortfall in the personnel services category of approximately $5.9 million. And we saw that there was a surplus based upon their expenditures for 9 months plus the next 3 months, that there would be a surplus of 7.9 in personnel, in total operations. And so this would allow then the transfer of the lapse in operations into these object categories to meet the shortfall for this fiscal year again. This is for this fiscal year and this school year. And this was developed with the EFSC information, the Education Finance Commission, and the Board of the Superintendent and Guam Education Board. So these are technical amendments and transfers in nature. So, okay. Section 20 is the reprogramming and appropriation of funds for SQ Sanchez Elementary School. And again, this is the bill as part of the original bill in which $100,000 would be reprogrammed from the tobacco fund. Senator Rodriguez, did you want to speak on this section? Okay, so section 20, Senator Dueñas.
I just wanted to be clear, I did get a phone call on this one too from Mr. Rios. The committee report, I believe the written, I think we might, maybe when we recess later, we'll have to investigate it, but I think he mentioned there's a need for the notwithstanding provision language in this section as well because of the earmark funding and what it was funded for originally. Can we pick up the committee report? Take a look at that.
Yes, the committee report on Bill 257, inclusive of the fiscal note from BBMR?
Yes.
Should be in your committee report. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, can we maybe recess for a second and just confirm that is there a requirement for a notwithstanding provision on section 20 in order to utilize this funding source for that purpose?
Okay, Senator Rodriguez, did you? Okay, all right. So
unless you know the answer already, Senator Rodriguez, the concern was brought up that we need to put a notwithstanding
So
provision.
did you have, maybe you would wish
I want to confirm that it's here.
to request a question on this provision?
Yes.
Okay. Senator Rodriguez, would you yield to the question? Okay, so we'll do a 1-minute recess. Okay, thank you very much, because I get to go. There's been some additional discussion we had, and we've clarified the issue, and I think everyone's been satisfied with the clarification and determined that no additional amendment would be required to this section. Okay? So this would provide that. No comments on that. Section 21, Senator Rodriguez, you were okay with Section 20? Section 21, maintenance of personnel, educational opportunities, and resources. Again, this is just a statement that the budget levels in this budget for fiscal year 2012 will provide enough resources for the DOE schools, inclusive of F.Q. Sanchez Elementary School for school year 21. Section 22 is a continuing appropriation, and that would be that the additional appropriation being provided to F.Q. Sanchez in this budget would be not lapse and continue to be available to F.Q. Sanchez for its operations. Section 23, school to reopen. This is a provision that would allow the Guam Education Policy Board to explore the alternative and implement alternative measures to feasibly maintain the operations of F.Q. Sanchez for school year 2011 and 2012, and that those alternative measures may include things, programs such as sharing human resources, transformation, transfer, not transform, transfer. That's a technical amendment at this time from Speaker One. And so forth. So, actually, my behavior in this session has been a transformation. So section 23, Senator Rodriguez, Speaker Wampat, since this was her section, and then Senator Rodriguez has comments on section 23.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, and then thank you very much for saying that that's a technical correction. The other is that I think maybe throughout is that to make sure, I know maybe it's just this section that we do say F.Q. Sanchez, that we include the words elementary school then, so it's not just the name itself.
All right.
And I'd just like to, for the sake of our colleagues here, is that the language here is very strong in the sense that when it says that the board shall, and it's kind of italicized, that they would have the authority, shall have that authority to explore and implement alternative measures, and that means whatever is the most feasible, of course, in terms of programs and the use of human resources to be able to do this, and even the option, of course, if possible, the contracting of private entities to deliver such services. Although that might be a little bit late, but it's open always for future, use primary. And the reason why it's written this way is because, like I said earlier in my opening comments, is that in speaking with the community, they had many different ideas in which they feel can be implemented to be able then to keep the school open, to reopen F.Q. Sanchez Elementary School, and that's what this Section 23 will actually do, giving not just them, the board in education, the flexibility then to be able to design such a program for the school.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Yes. Anything else, Speaker? Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Speaker Wampat. Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I echo the sentiments of Speaker Wampat. And I've said all along that, I respect the board. I respect the autonomy of the board. I respect every other branch of government. And what the Speaker has done here in her amendment earlier on the floor was make sure that that responsibility of how that school is going to be operated still remains with the board, and rightly so. Yeah, and so that's here. But and with I think the general intent of this substituted bill, it's here that the legislature's intent is to keep FQ Sanchez open. However, it's 6 days before school is supposed to start. I think this is the 11th hour, and I think if we're going to take action like this, we need to be very clear that what we're going to do with FQ Sanchez for this school year. We have here as it's written is that the board shall have the authority to explore and implement alternative measures for this school year. But realistically, I don't know if that's something we could possibly do in such a short period of time. And so, Mr. Chair, I have a amendment that I've circulated. It's on page 14, line 12, section 23, and I'll read it. It says, Section 23, school to immediately reopen, maintenance of personnel, educational opportunities, and resources. For the school year 2011-2012, the Guam Education Policy Board shall ensure that FQ Sanchez Elementary School has the requisite staffing pattern and resources as are necessary for the proper education of the children. Upon the enactment of this act, the GEB shall additionally have the authority to explore and implement alternative measures to feasibly maintain the operations of FQ Sanchez Elementary School for school year 2011-2012, school year 2012-2013, and beyond. Such measures may include, but shall not be limited to, the sharing of human resources between other schools, the transfer, reassignment, recruitment, or retention of personnel, or the contracting of private entities to deliver such services at FQ Sanchez, provided, however, the school shall not be closed. As provided for in Section 3 and in Section 20 of this Act, E. Legislature hereby provides the necessary funding for the staffing and operations of FQ Sanchez Elementary School. So the ending part here really is the same as what it is on the substitute version, with just some minor additions. But this really, Mr. Chair, just makes it clear that a short time frame that we have, 6 days before the start of the school year, that the intention is clear from this body that we want the school open starting August 9th. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you very much, Senator Rodriguez. On the amendment, any members of the body wish to speak on the amendment? Is there any objection to Senator Palacios?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the bottom line with 257 actually has to do with defining the nature and extent of the powers and authority of the board. And I would think that some elements of that amendment would perhaps begin to deteriorate the powers and authority of the board with respect to its current autonomy. And I think that if the board has no authority to decide whether to close or not to close the school, I'm not very comfortable with that, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not objecting to the amendment. I'm just now beginning that this is, to me, this is now beyond closing or opening a school and anything else. This is a defining moment, like I said, that would define the nature and extent of the legitimacy of the board in what it can do and what it cannot do, and the current autonomy that the board enjoys. Mr. Speaker, is the clear intent of this body when it established the board, and especially when it allowed again for a mix of between elected members and appointed members, because this body has been wrestling with the nature of the board. And so the way I see Bill 57 is not so much about closing or opening the school, but I'm looking at how we're going to end up today in redefining, again, like I said, the powers. And this amendment, I see this personally as a beginning of a deterioration or diminishing of the autonomy or the authority of the board, and that's my concern. I'm not objecting to the amendment. I'm expressing my concern. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Palacios. Senator Aileen.
Thank you very much, Speaker Ben. I am objecting to the amendment. And I am doing that because all along I have said, and I've made it very clear, that there are current laws in place that describe Guam Education Policy Board. Most certainly, I think the Board of Education is the one body that has been changed every 2 to 4 years. And most recently, we have now a hybrid model in place. And I really believe that we need to give the body time to work. And the only way it's going to work is if we respect what they're charged to do and respect their decisions. Now, if the decision to shut down, to merge, not shut down, to merge FQ Sanchez with Molesto Martyrs was done without public hearings and was done without discourse, then there would be great concern all around. This is a highly emotional decision because it does impact 57 of our kids and a bigger community. But the statute is in place. The board has made a decision. The superintendent stands by her board, and as a lawmaker, I continue to stand by the law that has put the Board of Education in place. And I think it needs to be clear that while some folks have decided that that decision was made because of money, I stand by that decision because I really think that educationally it's healthier for those students to be with a bigger community. There's a lot of merit to say that a smaller community educationally is good and more personalized, but there's also argument to say that too narrow of an experience space is not healthy. That community has gone from about 200 students and has declined to now 57. There's got to be a reason why. Traveling another 5 to 10 minutes to a neighboring school is going to be healthier for them socially, emotionally, and cognitively. And so while I appreciate senators in this room standing for the feelings of their community, I do object to this amendment, and I do believe it would be better for the school community to merge with Molesto, or I think the superintendent has most graciously given them an alternative, and if I got it correct, has allowed them to decide to go to Marshall Sablon. So those alternatives are there, and so Speaker Ben, that's where I stand.
Thank you very much, Senator Yamashita. Any other comments? Senator Respicio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You know, Mr. Chairman, it's precisely the discussion and the comments made by the previous speaker that I wanted, and all of us wanted, to have to avoid here in this legislature. The bill so far set a course for no matter how you stand on this issue, I believe it accommodates your concern or the concern of that senator. And you know, I want to recognize you as being the appropriations chair and for putting forward a bill that if you're of the opinion that the authority rests with the board, then this bill accommodates that. If you're of the opinion that the governor ultimately is responsible for making sure that schools remain opened or closed, and we have Governor Calvo going on record, then this bill accommodates that. But ultimately, like all of us here in this body, we want FQ Sanchez to remain open. And this bill accommodates that, Mr. Chairman, because it provides the resources to the Department of Education. But it also respects the authority of the elected and appointed board to make that ultimate decision. Now, if in the event, and mind you, of the 9 members, 5 of the members, one of them is Mr. Meade that's appointed, 5 of those appointed members made that decision. I mean, clearly, Governor Calvo, on one hand, who says he wants to keep the school open, could have talked to his appointees and make sure that we never have to put this kind of stress and angst on the UMATIC community. But be that as it may, this bill recognizes that if in the event the board, in its infinite wisdom, decides to keep that school closed, it gives the power to the governor to make sure that that school is opened on August 9th. Now, I appreciate the valiant efforts of the mover of this amendment, and rather than having to have anyone object to it, I'm going to plead publicly that he withdraw it. That he withdraw it because it makes the statement that after all the work that's been put into this bill, after all the concerns that we believe have been addressed, an amendment like this recognizes that, oh, in the end, your school would remain closed. Whereas we have to take the optimistic position that what we're doing here will lead to what our intended goal is. And I really respect the retiring speaker who had the courage to say that she objects to this bill. I'm expressing that same concern, and I want to appeal to the members of the community, particularly those who are behind this issue, Mr. Chairman. The emotions have run high. There's been threats made against us on local talk shows. I think that's unconscionable. And for those people to come in here and take objection to what we're doing, that's democracy. Let's debate and let's agree to disagree and discuss things at a level where we can all display maturity. But for some of them to say to someone like me publicly that they're going to kick my ribs and punch my face, Mr. Chairman, in my 9 years of being in elected office, in my entire adult life of being in a political environment, I've never had this threat made against me. And it's unnerving. It's unnerving, Mr. Chairman. I filed a police report this morning because people have to be accountable for what they say. And so I just don't want this kind of amendment to make some kind of heightened anxiety that the legislature has to say school to immediately reopen. There's the wherewithal from within this bill. I think it expresses concern for what Mr. Meade said, that if we're going to overrule the Board of Education, then let's not have a Board of Education. Maybe the governor or the legislature should run DOE. And so if the objection has to stand, I'll join in that objection, but I'm respectfully pleading to the sponsor of this amendment, out of respect for collegiality, out of respect for the desire to have one message that everything we're doing in this bill would accomplish exactly what everyone's concern is. I'm concerned, Mr. Chairman, that if this amendment were to be put in this bill, I'm concerned that you may not have enough votes to pass this bill. So I publicly rise to commend the proposal that's being put forward so that it represents those various concerns that each of us have. And I'll say it again. You want the board to make the decision? It's there. You want the governor to be held to his campaign promise of keeping that school open? It's in here. You want to keep the school open? It's in here. The resources are being provided to DOE. And if the board does not want to recognize that, then the governor can step up and act like a leader and exercise his authority, which we're giving to him, to keep that school open. I'm appealing to the sponsor. I want to congratulate Senator Rodriguez for achieving a big victory for the entire island community, not just for the people of Umatic, but for bringing this issue forward. But sometimes, Mr. Chairman, I've learned that if you push too hard, it breaks. And if you want everything, you get nothing. And if this amendment passes in this bill, I don't think I'm going to vote for the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Respicio. Any other comments on the amendment? There being an objection, Senator Rodriguez, did you want to close? Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And, you know, I respect all my colleagues, and I respect all their comments. But, Mr. Chair, I think it's very important to note that when did this body, when did this legislature ever waver in its responsibility? Ever waver when we see something wrong that's being done out in the community that we feel that's an injustice, like closing down a school, a tiny school, because they only have 54 students? When did this legislature ever waver? Very recently, we had an elected school board, 100% elected school board, that was going to decide on the fate of the John F. Kennedy High School. But the legislature intervened and made that decision to make sure that it doesn't move. That site, that old campus is there. And God bless the JFK students and family. And so that being said, I'm still appealing with my colleagues to this bill, as it is, does have all the mentions of our intentions to keep FQ Sanchez open. And so what this amendment simply does, Mr. Speaker, is make it very clear, with the 6 days that we have left for the start of the school year, make it clear that we're going to reopen it. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Rodriguez.
Mr. Chairman, can we just take a brief recess?
Sure.
I have to.
There's a request
use-
for a brief recess. We're continuing the discussion on the amendment, and we wanted to get the perspective of the member of the board that's here, as well as the superintendent, on any of their comments with regards to the proposed amendment and the board's position on it. And so at this time, we'd like to go ahead and recognize Mr. Barry Mead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I start, I also wanted to, I was remiss earlier in not thanking the entire body for allowing us to be here to do this process today. It's very encouraging to see this, and also to give everyone an opportunity for their input. Up until a moment ago, the board was very comfortable with this entire bill, including Section 23 as it's written. There were concerns of the board that how do we do this if we're not able to do certain things or make certain changes that we have been limited in being able to do. Some of the things that the board wants to do, the hands are tied, whether it be through public law that exists or through contracts that exist or through other actions. The intent of the law, and the reason that I asked the speaker for a clarification earlier with another section to this law, was to ensure that should this bill pass, it comes down to the board being given a budget by the superintendent that would allow for us to maintain and keep the school open at a budget that is reasonably close to the average per student cost of the entire department, which is around $7,000 if you look at it. We have a range of all other schools that ranges from about $64,000 to $9,000 per student, where unfortunately the school in Pneumatic, because of the population and the cost, is double the rest of the schools at $18,000. With this bill, the way it is written and the verbiage that is in Section 23 currently, it allows for the board and allows for the superintendent to come up with a budget that would allow for the school to remain open with a cost per student somewhere in the neighborhood of $7,500. Back in the original meeting at Antalan Middle School, when I made a motion to keep the school open until the superintendent and then the principal were able to do the budget and try and work out the budget, we did not have the tools we have today. We do not need to open the school on Monday that immediately. The board has the ability to change the school calendar, as we did for JFK, or as we will be doing for JFK, that will allow for the school to open at a later date, because right now the school is not staffed. We need to allow the superintendent and her folks to staff the school with faculty. We have, I would assume the principal would remain the principal of Molesso and FQ Sanchez, if that were the way it would be go. And we would then be able to staff the school. We would be able to do this in a proper manner. To rush into it by Monday, okay, fine. But what would we end up with? As Senator Respicio said earlier, it could end up being broke altogether. So what I'm asking Senator Rodriguez to do is to give the board the opportunity to do its job, to do what this body confirmed us to do, and have faith in the fact that the board is a group of people that have a lot of insight, have the desire to educate the kids, to have the desire to keep all of our schools opening, but within the parameters that we try and run the entire department. I mean, when you look at this budget and we talk about things, the question is, how did the budget get from $269 million to $235? Well, that was because of board action. That was board review of the budget submitted, and the superintendent can attest to the almost inquisition that the department went through over that budget. And all I'm saying is, this bill gives the board the tools to do its job in a way better than we had yesterday. But to come up and mandate and say it will be open immediately, then you don't need us. Quite honestly, you don't need us. The situation that you talked about with JFK is different than this situation. The situation with JFK, we're talking, in the end, something like $210 million in money that the board didn't have the authority to do. The board didn't have the authority at all to do anything with JFK, where the legislature did, and that's why the body did it. In this case, this is the board's purview as mandated by law. Give us the opportunity to do our mandate. By doing the amendment, we no longer have that mandate. We have the tools, we have the ability, we are able to delay the opening of the school long enough to allow the superintendent to staff the school based on the allocation. And if that allocation is the average of all the other school per student costs, so be it. We'll staff the school and the board will meet. And when the board meets, it will be, to follow the proper procedure, it must be asked for reconsideration by a member of, in this case, the affirmative. The person will make the motion, it'll hit the floor, and we'll go forward from there. And you've allowed that if the board, if for some reason doesn't, then the governor can. Let that process work. The amendment, Senator, to me, says you have no faith, no confidence, and no trust in your board. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Meade.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to just make that correction. That's not what it says. I'll allow the board and you to do your job. You allow me to represent those voices out there, those tiny voices. And that's what I'm doing with this, with this fight. And I completely understand, and I'm willing to make that compromise, Mr. Chair, and to withdraw if I have to, but I need to get that assurance because, what this these I think it's just one sentence here that's added to this section is saying that making sure that we reopen the school. It doesn't matter if it's not on Monday, but just like you said, the board has the authority to push that schedule back. So is that something that you're saying that we can't continue to give the false hopes to these people, 6 days from school and saying, okay, we're going to do this, and at the end, it's still going to be the same. So is that still an option without this amendment? No, but I'm asking from the board's perspective, is that still not even without this amendment with the bill as it is today? So that's still, we're making it clear with the intent of what the legislature intent is here. Without this amendment, that we're providing the resources to DOE, the whole department, in making sure that schools are provided adequate funding, including FQ Sanchez.
That's what this says right here.
That's right. So is that an assurance from you?
Your amendment says, provided, however, the school shall not be closed.
That's right.
So this amendment says, board, don't even bother.
That's right. And that's my intention.
Okay. Pass your amendment.
So I can get a assurance that this school will be reopened.
You have given the tools to the board, and you have given the tools to the department to do its job. I have been appointed as the parent representative to the Board of Education. I live in Santa Rita. Some of those parents out there were my students. So don't you for ever 1 minute think that I don't care. Or won't do the best I can to see that school open.
I've never said that you don't care, so don't put
then
words
don't
in
even
my mouth.
imply it, Senator.
Don't put words in my mouth.
Don't imply it.
Mr. Chair, I call for the vote on the amendment.
There's been an objection, and we will now call for the vote on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. The amendment fails. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have another motion because the entire intent of Bill 257 was to reopen the school. And so this amendment failing, I wish to move to remove my name as the primary sponsor of Bill 257.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I can't state enough how Bill 257, as amended, seeks to keep the school open and will keep the school open because, as Mr. Mead said, gives the board all the necessary resources and tools necessary to make that kind of decision. But leave it to them to make that decision. Now, with the motion that the sponsor is making to remove his name from the sponsor, now there is no sponsor of the bill. And pursuant to our standing rules, the sponsor at any time can withdraw the bill in no matter what stage of the legislative process. So is he intending to remove his name so that it becomes a product of the body, or is he intending to withdraw the bill?
On that question,
Yeah, and-
Senator Rodriguez, will you
yes.
yield to that question?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, would that be the ruling of the chair? Because if it is, I don't want to hamper the process because I know, I understand, I recognize how important, the whole DOE budget is. So if that is your ruling, and that this body won't be able to entertain further this bill without a primary sponsor, then I would withdraw that motion.
Withdraw the motion to remove your name?
Yes.
Yeah.
If it is your determination that we won't be able to move forward without that.
I guess we would need a parliamentarian to rule on that. So.
Okay, if not, just to make the process go
Smoother.
on, because, I do have to leave as
Okay.
well, I would withdraw that and
All
leave
right.
it. But for the record,
Okay.
that's stated already.
We understand your
Yes,
position.
thank you,
All
Mr.
right.
Chair.
So the motion to withdraw the author's name has been withdrawn. No objection to that. So we're now in Section 24. Section 24 is a section that would provide the governor the authority to keep the school open if, for whatever reason, the board decides to reaffirm its decision to keep it open. And it would allow the governor, by executive order, to issue that would detail the conditions and keep the school open for FY 2011 and 12, as he's already promised he wants to and he will. So, no objections? We're going to just break for just a short break. We've got a couple of amendments that, Senator Speaker Wampat, you have one, right?
Can I have the page to please pass it out? Yes. The amendment I have that will be passed out would be a new section. It would say, notwithstanding any other provision of the law, the appropriations made in this act shall not be subject to the transfer by the governor. However, the governor is authorized to transfer any amount from other FY 2012 appropriations into any non-personnel GDOE object categories. And this is a language, Mr. Chairman, that we've used all the time really for the Department of Education, because it is the largest department. It has almost half of the total appropriations, and it's always tempting to go to larger departments to be able to try to take monies out to support the others. And this would only protect, of course, that you can't take money out, but you'll be able to put money into GDOE.
All right. On that amendment, again, the amendment would allow the governor to transfer money into DOE should they need more money, and he wants to give them more money. And so, no objections. The amendment carries. We have one final amendment, I believe. Would the page please make sure that the clerk has the amendment that was proposed by Speaker Wampat and passed by the body? So we're just going to get that one final amendment copied. Just a short recess. We're back. This one?
Yeah, we have to amend section 1. It was
Okay.
miscommunication, so it's being done right now.
All right.
To amend section.
Yeah, we can just say add that to section 1. Yeah. No, add it. Yeah. No. Add it to section 1. At the end. Three.
It should be merged.
It's really just this part that applies right now.
Okay.
Okay, that it can go forward about his name. Now, to remove his name is just a regular motion. I mean, and we can do anything with sponsorship that we want to go forward.
Okay.
So do you want to remove his name, vote on it? Do you want to add anybody else?
Okay.
Right? And remind him that the names will be added. If a vote, or if the vote, which one? In voting, right? No, when do we add our names?
Doesn't say. When are we going to vote on this bill? Today?
We're ready.
Oh, you're ready?
We're
Okay.
ready, except for these last ones that Chris is doing.
Okay.
I can't even see them yet. So vote on them.
You're,
Okay,
you,
Jay.
you're going to incorporate that into section 1. Committee of the Whole is back in session. Speaker Wampat?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I do have one amendment that everyone should have a copy of. What I like to do is to have this amendment then incorporated into Section 1. So if you look at Section 1, which is the title, and it's just a technical, if you look at line 4, where it says otherwise provided by this act, I mean, that just have to kind of incorporate the wordings there with what we have here, where it says that the appropriations contained in this act, with the exception of Section 20 and Section 17B, shall be funded by fiscal year 2012 General Fund, Territorial Educational Facilities Fund, the Public Library Resources Fund, Indirect Cost Fund, the School Lunch Child Nutrition Meal Reimbursement Fund, and the Healthy Futures Fund revenues.
Okay, so basically it's to recognize where this money and from which funds they are being appropriated from for FY 2012. And that would be incorporated into Section 1 of the bill. Any objections to that? That amendment carries. We had a question earlier with Senator Rodriguez on the sponsorship of the bill, and we just wanted to clarify that to ensure that we got his intentions. He had requested that his name be withdrawn from the bill, and there was a question whether or not the bill can proceed without a main sponsor. Our standing rules provide in section 6.04D8, sponsorship of bills passed. The name of any senator added as a main sponsor or co-sponsor to any bill passed may be removed from the bill upon the submission of a written request to the senator, a written request of the senator to the clerk of the legislature at any time prior to presentment of such bill or resolution to Imagalahinguahan. Any such action shall be recorded in the legislative journal on the next legislative day. If there are no named sponsors left on the bill after passage, it shall be transmitted to Imagalahinguahan, having been sponsored by Pt.2 na Legislaturang Guahan. So the withdrawal of the sponsor's name does not kill the bill just by withdrawing his name. So we can proceed according to this, if I read it correctly, then proceed without the main sponsor's name, and then it will be transmitted as being passed by Pt.2 na Legislaturang Guam. However, we also want to note that there is an automatic provision that if there are no objections, then all senators get their names added to the bill if it's passed. So it just gets our names back on. So, Speaker, our Majority Leader.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Senator Palacios. May I recognize our Majority Leader first?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly agree with what you just read because it's very clear, which is why I asked the good senator what his intentions are. Is his intention to remove his name or to withdraw the bill completely? Because there's another provision in our rules that say that the sponsor of the bill may withdraw the bill at any time.
That's correct.
And so I wanted to be clear that if he was intending to withdraw the bill, then we would not have a bill.
That's correct.
Yeah, thank you, Mr.
And I
Chairman.
think he was pretty clear where he said that if the effect of withdrawing his name would be that the bill cannot go forward, then he would withdraw his motion. So his intention was not to withdraw the bill.
Correct.
Okay. Senator Palacios.
Mr. Speaker, according to that interpretation, I think you said that after the bill is passed,
Right.
and then members can request in writing to withdraw.
That's correct.
This bill is still under debate,
That's correct.
and in the process of moving toward passage, it would have no author anymore.
That's correct.
So the situation, in my opinion, is different.
No, but
Because the withdrawal occurs prior to the passing of the bill. And the standing rule said that after the passing of the bill, then the withdrawal can be made at any time. But the bill has not yet passed that point.
that's correct. I agree. And but if there are no names on the bill when it's passed, then it becomes the 31st Guam Legislature's bill.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So I think by restoring his name and it's passed, then later on he can withdraw.
Correct.
Then it will be according to the standing rule.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. So we are now, so his intention was not to withdraw his name and impede the passage of the bill. So that's, right, and then he can withdraw his name at any time before we send it on to the governor. Yes. Okay?
Mr. Chairman, can I just go
Yes,
back?
Speaker Wampat.
What we had just passed, the amendment, just to make sure then that for all other bills that there is this general motion then that where there are technical corrections, because the amendment we just passed actually is not 17B, it should be 17A because we had renumbered.
Okay.
So
Oh,
I
that's
just
right.
wanted to
Yeah,
make sure
so
that
that's right.
is caught. And then in all other sections that any reference to FQ Sanchez, that we do include the elementary school as well.
FQ Sanchez
Yes,
Elementary School.
Thank
All
you.
right. So those will be the technical amendments. Any other discussion on the bill? That concludes the legislature's, all the sections of the bill. Are there any other final comments or discussion on the bill? Yes. Yes, sure. Senator Monasilva, Tyrone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair. I just want to take the opportunity to commend the community of UMATIC for their passion for their community and their perseverance in this issue. They faced a lot of challenges, and they continue to face challenges. Even the roads on both sides going into the village are deteriorating, so pretty soon they're going to be isolated. And that's just one thing that they face every single day. They saw a problem and they came together as a community and said, we want this. This school is named after a forefather. So obviously it means a lot to them to have this school open. And so, you know, we do have faith in the board. And by giving you the flexibility to at least consider opening up the school and meeting their desire and seeing that this community wants the school badly enough, please consider their request. We trust and we have faith in the board, in the elected board. We are an elected board as well, and we don't want to force your hand. But we respect you and respectfully ask that you consider their desire. They come down here as often as they possibly can, and it's a long way to go. A lot of them don't have vehicles. So they charter a bus and they come down here to ask us, please hear their voices and hear their cries. So we also ask you, and we all here in the legislature, because we're sitting here arguing this point, we all want to keep FQ Sanchez open. And so we're backing up the community that put us in this office and saying, please board, consider their cries and see to it that their desires are at least considered on your part. I also want to commend the body and the office, the Committee on Finance, for their tenacity and their effort in putting together this bill that meets the needs of at least tries to meet the needs of the school. So that's where I stand, and I thank you, everybody, for coming together today.
You're very welcome, Senator Tyrone. I will go ahead and, in this order, would be Speaker Ben, Speaker Wampat, and then Senator Mabini, and then Senator Muñoz-Barnes. So, Speaker Ben, you're recognized on the main bill.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I want to express my appreciation to the members of this body for putting in the time and the effort to follow the work of the committee, to attend the hearings as we propose the proposal that has been presented to this body to meet the needs of the departments and agencies of the government of Guam and the other branches. I want to most especially thank all the members of this body for their cooperation in putting the discussion on DOE first. You know, there's a saying that well done is better than well said. And I think that for too long, since the beginning of the year, all we've had is well said. You know, we've received press release after press release that are beautiful, that paint all the pictures, but then when it gets down to doing the work, some of it doesn't get done. And I think this body has demonstrated that we're looking for well done rather than well said. And I think the participation that everyone has shown, the involvement, the engagement to address the issues that come before us, and then to make the priorities with regards to our action today, truly is well done, I believe, on this body, by this body and by its members. And so I want to thank everyone for their effort. On the issue of Sanchez Elementary, FQ Sanchez, I want to say that the effort to keep it open was an effort that I think deserves recognition and praise. The extra step that this body and this member is taking to ensure that it remains open not just for, you know, July and August and September, but that there are the resources, the ability, the authority to extend that, and for the board to know that they have the resources and the ability to then keep it open with the provisions contained in this bill to October, November, December, January, and the rest of the school year. And it provides that opportunity, provides the authority within the framework and the structure we have. And then it provides the opportunity for those that have been well said to be well done, so that if for whatever reason, the decision is to close Sanchez, that those individuals in our community, and it's the governor who says he supports it, he wants to keep it open. If it was up to him, he will keep it open. Well, if the board, for whatever reason, although we know that given the provisions of this bill, they have the ability, they now have the desire, as we've heard expressed, to re-examine alternative ways of keeping it open. And if for whatever reason they're not able to achieve that end in their deliberations, then the one person that can, that says he wants to, that says if he has the power, he will do so, will be able to do so in this bill. So it is this body willing to work through the processes that will assure that those individuals who have the desire are also vested with the authority, as we want to support keeping Sanchez open by ensuring that the bill and the budget goes beyond this school year into next year and will be able to support opening and keeping Sanchez Elementary School in Umatec open. So I want to thank the body for all of your cooperation. We're halfway through. We got more work to do in the next couple of weeks with the rest of the government budget. Thank you very much, NC Dusmasi.
Buen provecho, Speaker Ben. Speaker Wampat, you're recognized on the main bill.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and now Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity, of course, to speak on this and to work with you on the budget itself, and more importantly, of course, is to provide language here to, as you said earlier, and I'm sure everyone would say, is to address the concerns of SQ Sanchez Elementary School, but not in isolation, of course, of the entire budget of the Department of Education. And I think more than anybody else, it would be the community of Umatec who really would have a better understanding now by being here and seeing the entire process and seeing how one school, yes, and other schools actually affect the entire budget of the Department of Education. What I would like to appeal to, of course, is to the board members and the superintendent, the acting superintendent, who I'm sure you would be able to discuss this with the incoming superintendent, that when you have these types of situations, that you look at them and you address them and you set up some sort of guideline or process or rules and regs, whatever they are, because if you listen to people who came to testify at the time when 257 came before us, and even Mrs. Nelson, who's a former director of education, had gone through the process, and she has actually stated what she would have to do, and that, of course, is not in place. And as Mr. Chairman, you know that I do have a bill. I was going to offer it as an amendment, but I think it might be best in the bill form, really, that we don't go down this road again, similar to what, of course, had happened with FQ Sanchez Elementary, that the department really has to come up with some rules and regulations to talk about not just the opening of schools, which we've done. We're very experienced in doing that, but the closing of schools, the management of it, the rehabilitation of our schools, utilization of our schools, the disposition of our schools, the controlling of our school properties and the grounds and, real estate and all that. Rules and regulations would have to be set. And I don't think we ever would find ourselves down this road again. When that's done, when we make it a point to work with the community, work with the teachers, the faculty and staff, that are going to be affected. And I think if we did that, then it would go a long way. So like Mrs. Nelson said, it would be a lot smoother, be accepted by the community, because they are empowered now to decide, the fate of their school. But sometimes, Mr. Chair, that when we get to this point, it amazes me how, of course, people can actually come together for, a cause, and the creative thinking involved in terms of, wanting to make it happen. And in the two conversations, of course, just yesterday, the mayor has eloquently expressed, his concerns, and the people in the community also have said that there are many options that, are available to us, allow us to work, so by giving them the resources, I believe to the department now would allow that. I'm sure that the board and the superintendent has heard the concerns of the people, what they want to do. We are giving them the flexibility, we're giving them the resources, so that now then you can make this actually happen for the community of UMADAC, and more importantly for FQ Sanchez Elementary School. And I believe that what we have here gives so many options that's available to them, that from now on, from this day, once this goes to the governor's office, that then I encourage the community then to continue now to work very closely with you, Madam Superintendent, and the board. And I would like to also continue to work with them to assure that this actually goes through. We all want, FQ Sanchez to continue. We want to be able to educate all of our children, not just one over the other, because we don't want to pit, of course, any one of our children against each other. And I hope, Madam Superintendent, as well, because the other concern that was addressed to me personally, and also in the public hearing, is the concerns that the children even have about how, they may even be treated. And, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, but I don't think it should happen in any one of our schools. We talk about school orientation, then I think that, for any school, all the time, from our feeder schools into our middle schools, and from our middle schools into our high schools, that schools should take that very seriously to try to bring our children together, because we are one community. Regardless whether we're coming from different villages, we are still, one community, and it should be that way. And I have to say, and I applaud, of course, the community in UMADAC, truly, and I believe this, when the mayor relayed historical information to me yesterday, it just made me more passionate about then now wanting to make sure that truly the whole village of UMADAC, which is very historical, that FQ Sanchez Elementary School be a part of that history, from the fort down to the bay, up to the school, to the historical steps that are there, the river that they have right behind the school, all that. I mean, no other place in our island really can that be showcased than at UMADAC. And I believe that the school can be a part of this. The school, when I introduced that charter school bill, Mr. Speaker, it was primarily for FQ, because it's only through that school where truly the protection, the perpetuation of our language, our culture, our history is going to be from there. It's going to have to start from there. Because if we don't do anything now, we will lose it forever. And that's why that bill was offered. But we got to give the department the tools to do this. And I want the community to be a part of this. Because when the community embraces this program, whatever it is they feel will be best to do for that village and for the island and the future of the people of Guam, the future of the Chamorro people, will have to start from there, from a tiny village to the entire island of Guam. And thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and Sujasmasi, Madam Speaker. I have Senator Samambini.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You know, I know that we all came here today to discuss not just Bill 257, but also the complexities that surrounds it. And I would be remiss not to appeal to our leaders, and especially our general public. I know a lot of people are watching on TV. We have our great citizens from UMADAC out there. But, you know, this is part of the democratic process. And I'm so pleased as a new senator to see that we're going about this in a very respectful and professional way. I commend the challenges, you know, I commend the acting superintendent, chair, the challenges that you face, and everybody in here, and especially those who are especially my fellow senators who are very courageous in being able to put forth their thoughts, and I hope that we continue to recognize that and respect that and see how we can continue working together. Now that they have the tools set up in Bill 257, I have the confidence that the agency, Department of Education, will be able to move forward. But most importantly, that we do it all together. And again, commending the courage that all senators, had put forth to make it possible. School's starting around the corner. We need to still just work together, and I look forward to seeing how we can do this with Bill 257. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and Sudusmasi, Senator Mambini. Senator Munya-Barnes.
Sudusmasi, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity to speak on the main bill. And as noted by my colleagues, as we look at this bill and the presentation of what the author of this bill had desired for, I think it's even more important to realize that this bill wasn't only just to keep FQ open, but it was to make sure that every child in every village will realize and know that education, our children's education, comes first. And it starts from the South, Central, and North, and that we in this body have that commitment to make sure that we believe in our hearts that the education for our children come first. And I want to also acknowledge the hard work of the families and the togetherness of the families in UMATAC for staying strong, for staying committed, and realizing that our children definitely come first. And knowing that it is through this method and through this August body that we can make things happen. And if there are obstacles, that we find ideas and ways to make sure that if things need to be re-examined, that we can have the tools to give to the necessary folks within the educational department, to give them the necessary tools that they need to facilitate, to keep the schools open. And with that being said, I just want to thank the good author of the legislation for bringing this bill to the forefront, but also to you, Mr. Speaker, for making sure that we realize that in this August body, we have a commitment to our children, and that education, we have a promise to make education first. So I want to thank you for that. Also, Mr. Chair, as Legislative Secretary, I was asked to read the communique from that was addressed to the Majority Leader, Senator Respicio. It was dated August 3rd, and it says, "Dear Senator Respicio, since I am currently off island, I am requesting that you convey my bills to my colleagues during the legislative session this week. First, I commend the Guam Board of Education for their hard work and dedication. They have been faced with a severe funding shortfall and confronted by the Evergreen Management Audit reporting it makes no fiscal sense to keep FQ Sanchez open. They have a fiduciary responsibility to squeeze every benefit out of every penny. The dollars and cents analysis drives the decision to close the school. The board did its duty. As senator, I see the broader landscape. As the chair of the Committee on the Guam Military Buildup and Homeland Security, I see the buildup already underway. Therefore, we will be facing an increasing population, and the need for educational facilities will increase, not decrease. Accordingly, I strongly support Bill number 257-31 COR as substituted. I commend the work undertaken in this legislation to broaden the approach, avoid micromanagement of the Guam Board of Education, and to provide flexibility to the board and the governor in this matter. The bill will provide for the efficient opening of all schools, including FQ Sanchez Elementary School, by providing financing for working capital expenditures for the 2001-2012 school year. Thank you, Senator Respicio, for hearing my position and communicating it to our colleagues. For the record, I am attending an intensive training program on the coastal marine and special management organized by the Western Pacific Fisheries Management Council and the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, which is NOAA. This training program focuses on the impact of development and other uses of the near shore and ocean resources. I was invited to participate because of my role in dealing with the potential impact of the planned military buildup on Guam's natural resources. Since Rementi, see Judith P. Guthert. So, Mr. Chair, I submit that, and as noted as Legislative Secretary, that it should be included in the report.
Thank you very much,
Masi.
and Sidus Masi, Senator Munya Barnes. Any other senator wish to comment on the bill? If not, can I ask our majority leader then for a motion?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman. I have the honor and privilege to make a motion that we rise from the Committee of the Whole on the matter of Bill number 257-31 as substituted by the Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Public Debt, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land, and further substituted on the floor. And on behalf of every single member of this legislature, I know the Speaker and yourself share this sentiment to express our appreciation to Madam Superintendent Taling Taitno. Thank you for your guidance, as well as appointed board member, Mr. Barry Mead. Thank you for spending the afternoon with us, and also to the UMATA community and those that have been following this bill and this issue very closely. So I offer this motion at this time, and also publicly acknowledging your work, Mr. Chairman, and the work of the Office of Finance and Budget. Thank you.
Thank you, and that'll be the motion to rise on Bill 257.
With all the amendments being tagged.
And a recommendation?
To pass.
Oh, thank you very much. Sidus Masi, on that motion to rise, no objections? Committee then will rise, and will now turn the podium back to the Speaker. Let me report back.
Wait, what? That was my motion. So we just want to make sure everybody understands all the amendments, right? Okay, yes, yes.
Okay.
The Committee of the Whole has risen, and I recognize the chairman of the committee, Speaker Pangilinan. You're recognized.
Thank you, and Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Public Debt, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land has risen from the committee as a whole and reports back to the committee on the matter of Bill 257-31 COR. Committee has risen and recommended that Bill 257-31 COR, as substituted by the Committee on Appropriations, Public Debt, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land, and further substituted on the floor, and further amended on the committee as a whole, that the body reports back, having concluded its actions, and that the recommendation of the body of the committee of the whole would be to pass Bill 257. At this time, then, I'd like to move that Bill 257-31 COR, as substituted by Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Public Debt, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land, further substituted on the floor and further amended in the Committee of the Whole, be placed in the third reading file for the purpose of voting this afternoon, and that the body votes on the bill without engrossment.
On that motion, does everybody understand the motion? Without engrossment? No objections? So ordered. Senator Respicio, then, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Before we go to the voting file, I'm in receipt of a committee report filed by my committee, so I make a notwithstanding motion to place the appointment of William R. McDonald to serve as a District Director of the Southern Guam Soil and Water Conservation District, and I move that he be placed in the legislative concurrence file and then subsequent in the voting file, and I make that as a notwithstanding.
On that motion, without any objection, it is a notwithstanding motion. No objection, so ordered.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I believe at this time we can proceed to the voting file.
Can you just give me the name again of the individual?
It's William R. McDonald
William
to serve as a District Director of the Southern Guam Soil and Water Conservation District.
Thank you. Okay, do you have it? I'd like to ask the clerk to please read Bill 257 as substituted.
Bill number 257-31 COR, as substituted by the Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Public Debt, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land, and further substituted on the floor and amended on the floor. Introduced by Dennis G. Rodriguez, Jr. An act to appropriate funds for the operations of the Guam Department of Education for fiscal year ending September 30, 2012, and to provide for the efficient opening of all schools, including F.Q. Sanchez Elementary School, by providing financing for working capital expenditures for the 2011 and 2012 school year and for other purposes.
Senator Tom Atta?
Yes.
Senator Tony Atta?
Yes.
Senator Blas? Vice Speaker Cruz? Senator Dueñas?
Yes.
Senator Guthertz? Senator Mabini? Senator Munya Barnes? Senator Palacios? Senator Pangilinan? Senator Respicio? Senator Rodriguez? Senator Silva Tyron? Speaker Wanpat?
Yes.
Senator Yamashita? Senator Blas? Senator Mabini?
Senator Respicio, you recognize.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I move that we excuse Senator Rodriguez from voting. I understand that he had prior arrangements to be off island, and he should be at the airport at this time.
On that motion then, without any objections, ordered. Substitute Bill number 257-31 COR received 12 yea votes and 3 excused absence. Therefore, substitute Bill number 257-31 is duly passed by this body. Yes. We're doing confirmations now. Gentlemen, we're still on the voting file. On the appointment of Ms. Evelyn Casil to serve as a member of the Parks and Recreation Committee, all in favor, please raise your hand. Ms. Evelyn Casil received unanimous support, well, at least 12 in this case, who are present. She is duly confirmed. On the appointment of Mr. William West Cassidy to serve as a member of the Guam Banking and Insurance Board, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, Mr. Cassidy also received 12 votes and 3 absent. He is duly confirmed by this body. On the appointment of Mr. Mark Fish to serve as a member of the Guam Banking and Insurance Board, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, Mr. Fish also received 12 votes. He is duly confirmed by this body. On the appointment of Ms. Elizabeth Gale to serve as a member of the Parks and Recreation Commission, all in favor, please raise your hand. Senator, are you voting? Senator Palacios, are you voting? Okay. Ms. Gale received 12 votes. She is duly confirmed by this body. On the appointment of Ms. Mary Michelle Gibson to serve as a member of the Port Authority of the Guam Board of Directors, all in favor, please raise your hand. One objection? Ms. Michelle Gibson received 12 votes. She is duly confirmed by this body. On the appointment of Ms. Rose Greeno to serve as a member of the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority Board of Trustees, all in favor, please raise your hand. Ms. Rose Greeno to serve as a member of the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority Board of Trustees. She received 12 votes. She is duly confirmed by this body. On the appointment of Mr. Artemio B. Ilagan to serve as a Banking Insurance Commissioner. We're going to have to do a roll call on this one.
Senator Tom Ada? Yes. Senator Tony Ada? Yes. Senator Blas? Yes. Vice Speaker Cruz? Absent. Senator Duenas? Senator Gutherts? Senator Mabini? Yes. Senator Muñoz Barnes? Yes. Senator Palacios? Senator Pangilinan? Hungan? Senator Respicio? Senator Rodriguez is out. Senator Mana Silva Tyron? Speaker Wampet?
Hungan.
Senator Yamashita?
Mr. Art Ilagan had received 12 yea votes and 3 are absent. Excused absentee. Mr. Artemio Ilagan is duly confirmed by this body. On the appointment of Attorney Vanessa Lee Borhaji to serve as a member of the Hagatnya Restoration and Redevelopment Authority, all in favor, please raise your hand. Are you voting, Speaker Ben? Again, okay, 12 votes. She is duly confirmed by this body. On the appointment of Ms. Anne Marie Muñoz to serve as a member of the Hagatnya Restoration, oh, I skipped one, I'm sorry, go back. On the appointment of Ms. Benita Atalik Manglotnia to serve as the Director of the Department of Administration, roll call.
Senator Tom Ada? Yes. Senator Tony Ada? Yes. Senator Blas? Vice Speaker Cruz? Senator Duenas? Senator Gutherts? Senator Mabini? Yes. Senator Muñoz Barnes? Yes. Senator Palacios? Yes. Senator Pangilinan? Senator Respicio? Senator Rodriguez? Senator Silva Tyron? Speaker Wanpat?
Again.
Senator Yamashita?
Ms. Benita Atalik Manglona received 12 yea votes and 3 are excused, and she is duly confirmed by this body to be the Director of Administration. On the appointment of Ms. Anne Marie Munya to serve as a member of the Hagatna Restoration and Redevelopment Authority, all in favor, please
Madam
raise your
Speaker, if I
hand.
may.
Yes, Senator?
Thank you. I just needed to disclose for the record that as Oversight Chair of Agana Revitalization Authority, that I need to disclose that Amory Therese Munya is my sibling, is my sister, and if the board has no objection, the body has no objection, I don't mind voting, but I have to disclose it for the record.
Should the body then recuse Senator Munya Byers from voting for her sister? No, we're going to make her vote, right? Yep. Let her sister owe her one. All in favor then of Ms. Anne Marie Munya to serve on the Hagatna Restoration Redevelopment Authority, please raise your hand. Okay, she received 12 yea votes. She is duly confirmed by this body. On the appointment of Mr. Carl Pangilinan to serve as Administrator of the Guam Economic Development Authority, roll call.
Senator Tom Atta? Yes. Senator Tony Atta? Yes. Senator Blas? Vice Speaker Cruz? Senator Dueñas? Senator Guthertz? Senator Mabini? Yes. Senator Munya Barnes? Okay. Senator Palacios? Yes. Senator Pangilinan?
Madam Speaker, I want to disclose that Carl is not my brother.
I was wondering about that.
Senator Respicio? Senator Rodriguez? Senator Silva Tyron? Speaker One Pat?
Again.
Senator Yamashita?
On the appointment of Mr. Carl Pangilinan, he has received 12 yea votes and 3 were excused absence. Mr. Pangilinan is duly confirmed by this body. On the appointment of Mr. Frank C. Roberto to serve as the Director of the Agency for Human Resources Development, roll call.
Senator Tom Atta? Senator Tony Atta? Yes. Senator Blas? Vice Speaker Cruz? Senator Dueñas? Senator Guthertz? Senator Mabini? Yes. Senator Munya Barnes? Yes. Senator Palacios? Yes. Senator Pangilinan? Yes. Senator Respicio? Yes. Senator Rodriguez? Senator Silva Tyron? Yes. Speaker One Pat?
Again.
Senator Yamashita? Yes. Senator Tom Atta?
On the appointment of Mr. Frank C. Roberto, he received 12 yea votes and 3 excused absence. Mr. Roberto is duly confirmed by this body. On the appointment of Mr. John Rios to serve as a member of the Hagatna Restoration and Redevelopment Authority. That's good. Well, Jon, that's what I have in my... Oh. Let me put my glasses on. Let me take it off. Jon. John Rojas. To serve as a member, I was just wondering about that, Hagatna Restoration Redevelopment Authority. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. He received 12 yea votes. He is duly confirmed by this body. on the appointment of Mr. Richard P. Sablon to serve as a member of the Guam Community College Board of Trustees. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you very much, Senator. He received 12 yea votes, so therefore Mr. Sablon is duly confirmed by this body. On the appointment of Mr. Jesse T. San Nicolas to serve as a member of the Guam Commission for Educator Certification. All in favor, please raise your hand. Senate, okay. Thank you very much. He received also 12 votes. He is duly confirmed by this body. On the appointment of Miss Antoinette D. Sanford to serve as a member of the University of Guam Board of Regents. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, Ms. Sanford is duly confirmed, former senator, duly confirmed by this body, her colleagues. On the appointment of Mr. Craig R. Thompson to serve as a member of the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board. All in favor, please raise your hand. Senator Palacios, are you voting? Okay, thank you. Mr. Thompson then received 12 votes. He is duly confirmed by this body. On the appointment of Mr. Jesus Q. Torres to serve as a member of the AB Wanpet International Airport Authority Board of Directors. All in favor, please raise your hand. Mr. Torres is duly confirmed by this body. On the appointment of Mr. Danilo M. Rapadas to serve as a member of the Guam Banking and Insurance Board. All in favor, please raise your hand. Mr. Rapadas is duly confirmed by this body. On the appointment of Mr. William R. McDonough to serve as the District Director of the Southern Soil and Water Conservation District. All in favor, please raise your hand. Mr. McDonough is duly confirmed by this body. We've exhausted then the confirmation list and the only bill in the voting file. I recognize then the majority leader for a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I move that we adjourn, subject to the call of the Speaker.
So, thank you. No objections. This session, then, this legislature for today is duly adjourned and subject to the call of the Speaker. Happy birthday.